sorry. I love you. Don't hate me.
Everything.
Parker, Harry Osborn.
It's been 10 years. What have you been up to? Peter, you're gonna want to. Isn't that the question of the day?
Nothing is what I.
We have plans for you,
Need a hand?
Now you gotta pay. We have the power now. We can.
This is my path.
With great power comes even greater danger. As new enemies rise and secrets unfold, Peter Parker must balance the life of a hero with the heart of a man. The web-slinger swings into his greatest challenge yet. This is Spider-Man, 2014, only on Cinema Reviews. The Amazing Spider-Man 2, internationally titled The Amazing Spider-Man 2, Rise of Electro, is a 2014 American superhero film based on the Marvel Comics character Spider-Man, produced by Columbia Pictures in association with Marvel Entertainment, Arid Productions, Incorporated, Mattelmac Productions, and Ingenious Film Studios, and distributed by Sony Pictures Releasing. The film was directed by Mark Webb from a screenplay by Alex Kurtzman, Roberto Orsi, and Jeff Pankner, based on a story conceived by the three alongside James Vanderbilt. It is the sequel to The Amazing Spider-Man, 2012, and stars Andrew Garfield as Peter Parker, Spider-Man, alongside Emma Stone, Jamie Foxx, Dane DeHaan, Campbell Scott, Beth Davids, Colmfor, Paul Giamatti, and Sally Field. In this film, Peter Parker tries to protect his girlfriend, Gwen Stacy, as he investigates his parents' death while also dealing with the supervillain Electro and the return of his childhood friend, Harry Osborn. Development of The Amazing Spider-Man 2 began after the success of the first film. DeHaan, Giamatti, Felicity Jones, and Chris Cooper were cast between December 2012 and February 2013. Filming took place in New York City from February to June 2013. The film was released in 2D, 3D, and IMAX 3D on May 2, 2014, in the United States, with two international premieres being held between March 31 and April 10 of that year. It received mixed reviews from critics, who praised the chemistry between Stone and Garfield, action sequences, visual effects, and Hans Zimmer's musical score, but criticized the screenplay and overabundance of plot lines. Fox's portrayal of Electro received mixed responses. The film grossed $716.9 million worldwide, making it the ninth highest-grossing film of 2014. The Amazing Spider-Man series was originally intended to continue with at least two more sequels and several spin-offs, most notably films centered on Venom and the Sinister Six. In February 2015, Sony Pictures and Marvel Studios initiated a deal to share the Spider-Man film rights and reboot the character within the Marvel Cinematic Universe, MCU, canceling future projects in the Amazing Spider-Man film series. Tom Holland succeeded Garfield as Peter Parker, Spider-Man, beginning with Captain America, Civil War, 2016. Followed by his standalone film Spider-Man, Homecoming in 2017 and its sequel Spider-Man, Far From Home in 2019, both as part of Phase 3 in the MCU. Both Garfield and Foxx later reprised their roles in Spider-Man, No Way Home, 2021, linking this film to the MCU through the concept of the multiverse. Former Oscorp scientist Richard Parker records a video explaining the reasons behind his disappearance. Along with his wife Mary, he flees aboard a private jet, but the plane is hijacked by an assassin and crashes, killing them both. Years later, their son Peter continues his double life as Spider-Man, protecting New York City. After stopping Russian criminal Alexei Sabotage, Peter struggles with his relationship with Gwen Stacy, haunted by the vow he made to her late father to keep her safe. Gwen ultimately decides to break up with him after their high school graduation. Around the same time, Peter's childhood friend Harry Osborn returns home to see his terminally ill father, Norman Osborn, the head of Oscorp. Before his death, Norman reveals that their hereditary illness is beginning to affect Harry as well. Meanwhile, Oscorp electrical engineer Max Dillon suffers a freak accident, falling into a tank of genetically altered eels that transform him into a living electrical being. Confused and unstable, Max wanders into Times Square, where his uncontrolled powers cause chaos. Spider-Man manages to stop him, and Max is taken to the Ravencroft Institute. Desperate to cure his condition, Harry becomes convinced that Spider-Man's blood may hold the key. He asks Peter for help in reaching the hero, but when Spider-Man refuses out of fear the blood could worsen Harry's illness, Harry turns bitter. Betrayed by Oscorp executives and stripped of power, Harry teams up with Max, now calling himself Electro, to take revenge. Together, they break into Oscorp, where Harry discovers venom from the genetically altered spiders. Injecting himself with it, his condition worsens but also mutates him into a goblin-like form. Using an armored suit with advanced weaponry, Harry stabilizes himself and embraces his new identity. Peter later uncovers a hidden laboratory belonging to his father, where he finds a message revealing that Richard Parker fled because he refused to allow his research to be weaponized by Oscorp. Richard had used his own DNA to create the spiders, making Peter the only possible source of their abilities. As Peter and Gwen rekindle their love, Gwen earns a scholarship to Oxford, and the two plan to leave for England together. Their plans are cut short when Electro returns, plunging the city into darkness. Working together, Peter and Gwen restore power and defeat Electro by overloading his energy. The battle, however, is far from over. Harry, now fully transformed into the Green Goblin, attacks and learns Spider-Man's true identity. He kidnaps Gwen and takes her to a clock tower, where the confrontation ends in tragedy. Peter defeats Harry but fails to save Gwen, who falls to her death. Devastated, Peter abandons his life as Spider-Man. Months later, Harry, imprisoned at Ravencroft, begins plotting the formation of a team of supervillains with the help of his associate Gustav Fiers. He sets his sights on Alexei Sabotage, now armed with a massive mechanical suit. Taking on the name the Rhino, Sabotage unleashes havoc in the city. Inspired by Gwen's words from her graduation speech, Peter rediscovers his purpose and returns as Spider-Man to confront the new threat. The Amazing Spider-Man 2, 2014, a comprehensive analysis of casting choices and their impact on the film introduction. The Amazing Spider-Man 2, released in 2014, stands as a pivotal moment in the evolution of superhero cinema and the Spider-Man franchise specifically. Directed by Mark Webb and serving as the sequel to 2012's The Amazing Spider-Man, this film represented Sony Pictures' ambitious attempt to establish a cinematic universe around the beloved web-slinger. The casting decisions made for this film would prove to be both its greatest strengths and, in some cases, contributing factors to its mixed reception among critics and audiences. The importance of casting in superhero films cannot be overstated, particularly when dealing with iconic characters that have been beloved by generations of fans. Every casting choice carries the weight of expectation, the burden of authenticity, and the potential to either elevate or diminish the source material. In The Amazing Spider-Man 2, director Mark Webb and the casting team faced the challenging task of not only continuing the story established in the first film but also introducing new villains, expanding the mythology, and setting up future installments in what was planned to be an extensive cinematic universe. This comprehensive analysis will examine every aspect of the casting process for The Amazing Spider-Man 2, from the returning cast members who reprised their roles to the new additions who brought fresh energy and complexity to the Spider-Man universe. We will explore how these casting decisions influence the film's narrative structure, emotional resonance, and overall reception, while also considering the broader context of superhero filmmaking in the early 2010s. The Foundation, returning cast members Andrew Garfield as Peter Parker, Spider-Man. At the heart of The Amazing Spider-Man 2 is Andrew Garfield's continued portrayal of Peter Parker, the web-slinging superhero whose dual identity forms the emotional and narrative core of the film. Garfield's casting in the first Amazing Spider-Man film had been met with both enthusiasm and skepticism, as he followed in the footsteps of Tobey Maguire's iconic portrayal in Sam Raimi's trilogy. By the time The Amazing Spider-Man 2 entered production, Garfield had already established himself as a worthy successor to the Spider-Man mantle. Garfield brought a unique interpretation to Peter Parker that differed significantly from Maguire's more introverted, everyman approach, where Maguire's Parker was earnest and somewhat awkward in a relatable way. Garfield's version possessed a more modern, skateboard-riding, wisecracking personality that aligned with contemporary interpretations of the character in comics and other media. His natural charisma and athletic build made him believable both as the nerdy high school student and as the acrobatic superhero. In The Amazing Spider-Man 2, Garfield's performance demonstrated significant growth from the first film. His chemistry with the returning cast, particularly Emma Stone's Gwen Stacy, had deepened considerably, partly due to their real-life romantic relationship that developed during the filming of the first movie. This authentic connection translated into some of the most genuine and emotionally resonant moments in the entire film, elevating what could have been standard superhero fare into something more personal and affecting. Garfield's interpretation of Spider-Man's quip-heavy fighting style was particularly notable in this sequel. His ability to deliver humor while engaged in intense action sequences demonstrated his understanding of what makes Spider-Man unique among superheroes. The character's tendency to joke and banter during fights is not merely a quirk but a coping mechanism and a way to unnerve his opponents, and Garfield captured this essential aspect of the character with remarkable skill. The actor's physical preparation for the role was extensive, involving months of training in Parker, martial arts, and wire work. This dedication showed in every action sequence, where Garfield's natural athleticism combined with his acting ability to create a Spider-Man who felt genuinely comfortable swinging through New York City's urban landscape. His movements had a fluid, almost dance-like quality that distinguished his version of the character from previous portrayals. Emma Stone as Gwen Stacy. Emma Stone's return as Gwen Stacy was perhaps the casting decision that had the most significant impact on The Amazing Spider-Man 2's emotional weight and narrative drive. Stone, already an established star thanks to films like Superbad and Easy A, brought intelligence, wit, and genuine chemistry to her portrayal of Peter Parker's love interest. Her Gwen Stacy was not simply a damsel in distress or a passive romantic subplot but an active participant in the story with her own agency and intelligence. Stone's background and comedy served her well in delivering the film's lighter moments, particularly in her interactions with Garfield's Peter. Their banter felt natural and unforced, creating the impression of a real relationships between two intelligent, articulate young people navigating the complexities of love in extraordinary circumstances. This authenticity was crucial to the film's emotional impact, particularly given the tragic arc that Gwen's character would ultimately follow. The actress's interpretation of Gwen as a brilliant science student who could hold her own intellectually with Peter Parker added depth to the relationship dynamic. Rather than being impressed by Peter's intelligence, Gwen was his intellectual equal, creating a partnership that felt genuine and modern. Stone's portrayal emphasized Gwen's independence and capability, making her more than just a love interest but a fully realized character in her own right. Stone's physical presence in the film was equally important. Her ability to convey both vulnerability and strength, often in the same scene, made Gwen's eventual fate all the more impactful. The actress understood that Gwen's death, which occurs in the comic book source material, was likely inevitable, and this knowledge informed her performance with a subtle undercurrent of poignancy that resonated throughout the film. The real-life romantic relationships between Stone and Garfield, which began during the filming of the first movie, added an extra layer of authenticity to their on-screen chemistry. While some might argue that personal relationships can sometimes interfere with professional performance, in this case, it enhanced the believability of Peter and Gwen's connection, making their scenes together some of the most emotionally effective in the entire film. Sally Field as Aunt May. Sally Field's return as Aunt May represented one of the film's strongest casting continuities. Field, an Oscar-winning actress with decades of experience, brought gravitas and emotional depth to a role that could easily have been reduced to a simple supporting function. Her May Parker was wise, caring, and resilient, embodying the maternal figure who serves as Peter's moral compass and emotional anchor. Field's interpretation of Aunt May differed notably from Rosemary Harris's portrayal in the Raimi trilogy. While Harris played May with a more traditional, elderly grandmother energy, Field brought a younger, more vibrant approach to the character. This choice aligned with the film's overall younger aesthetic and allowed for more dynamic scenes between May and Peter, particularly as Peter struggled with the secrets of his identity and his father's past. The actress's natural warmth and authenticity made every scene with Peter feel genuine and emotionally grounded. Field understood that Aunt May serves as more than just a caretaker in Peter's life. She represents his connection to normal human relationships and moral responsibility. Her performance emphasized May's intuitive understanding that something significant was happening in Peter's life, even as she remained unaware of his secret identity. Field's scenes with Garfield demonstrated excellent chemistry, creating a believable familial relationship that served as the emotional foundation for Peter's character development. Her ability to convey both strength and vulnerability made May Parker a fully realized character rather than simply a plot device, and her presence in the film provided necessary emotional weight to Peter's personal struggles. New villains. The challenge of multiple antagonists. Jamie Foxx as Max Dillon, Electro. One of the most significant casting decisions in The Amazing Spider-Man 2 was the selection of Jamie Foxx to portray Max Dillon, the electrical engineer who becomes the villain Electro. Foxx, an Oscar-winning actor known for both dramatic roles and comedy, represented an ambitious choice that demonstrated the filmmaker's intention to bring serious acting credibility to the superhero genre. Foxx's portrayal of Max Dillon before his transformation into Electro was one of the film's more polarizing elements. His interpretation of the character as a socially awkward, overlooked Oscorp employee who idolizes Spider-Man drew both praise and criticism. Some viewers found his performance compelling and sympathetic, while others felt it veered too close to caricature. Foxx drew inspiration from various sources, including his own experiences of feeling invisible or overlooked, to create a character whose eventual transformation into a villain felt psychologically motivated. The transformation from Max Dillon to Electro required Foxx to essentially play two different characters within the same film. The vulnerable, desperate Max gives way to the powerful, angry Electro, and Foxx navigated this transition with considerable skill. His post-transformation performance emphasized Electro's intoxication with power and his sense of betrayal by Spider-Man, creating a villain whose motivations felt personal rather than generic. Foxx's physical transformation for the role was remarkable. The visual effects team created a distinctive look for Electro that differed significantly from the character's comic book appearance, opting for a blue, energy-based aesthetic that allowed Foxx's performance to show through the CGI. The actor worked extensively with the effects team to ensure that his performance would translate effectively through the digital enhancement, maintaining emotional authenticity even when his character was essentially made of electrical energy. The musical background that Foxx brought to the role proved to be an unexpected asset. His understanding of rhythm and sound helped inform Electro's unique audio signature, and Foxx collaborated with composer Hans Zimmer to create a villain theme that incorporated dubstep elements, reflecting the character's electric nature and appealing to contemporary audiences. Critics of Foxx's performance often focused on the character's pre-transformation scenes, arguing that Max Dillon's social awkwardness was overplayed or unrealistic. However, supporters of the casting choice pointed to Foxx's ability to make the character's pain and isolation feel genuine, creating a foundation for his eventual turn to villainy that felt emotionally justified rather than arbitrary. Dane DeHaan as Harry Osborn, Green Goblin. The casting of Dane DeHaan as Harry Osborn represented one of the film's most intriguing and ultimately controversial choices. DeHaan, known for his intense, brooding performances in films like Chronicle and the HBO series In Treatment, brought a different energy to the role than previous portrayals of Norman Osborn's son. His Harry was darker, more psychologically complex, and carried an undercurrent of instability that made his eventual transformation into the Green Goblin feel inevitable. DeHaan's physical appearance and acting style created a Harry Osborn who felt genuinely dangerous even before his transformation. His pale complexion, intense stare, and slightly unhinged demeanor suggested someone on the edge of psychological breakdown, making his eventual embrace of villainy feel like a natural progression rather than a sudden character shift. This interpretation differed significantly from James Franco's more traditionally handsome and initially sympathetic Harry in the Raimi trilogy. The actor's performance emphasized Harry's desperation and entitlement in equal measure. His Harry was someone accustomed to getting what he wanted, and when faced with his father's death and his own genetic disease, he became increasingly willing to use any means necessary to survive. DeHaan's ability to convey both vulnerability and menace, sometimes within the same scene, made Harry a compelling and unpredictable character. DeHaan's relationship with Andrew Garfield's Peter Parker was one of the film's most complex dynamics. The actors had to establish a believable friendship that could serve as the foundation for their eventual conflict, and both performers rose to this challenge. Their scenes together crackled with tension, as DeHaan's Harry displayed the kind of charm that made his friendship with Peter believable while also hinting at the darkness that would eventually consume him. The physical transformation required for DeHaan to become the Green Goblin was extensive, involving prosthetics, costume work, and digital effects. Unlike previous portrayals of the Green Goblin that relied heavily on masks or full CGI, DeHaan's version maintained more of his natural features, allowing his performance to remain visible and emotionally connected even in his villainous form. Some critics argued that DeHaan's Harry felt too immediately sinister, lacking the gradual corruption arc that made the character's fall more tragic in other versions. However, supporters of the performance appreciated the psychological complexity that DeHaan brought to the role, creating a Harry Osborn who felt genuinely disturbed and dangerous rather than simply misguided. Paul Giamatti as Alexei Sitsevich. The Rhino. Paul Giamatti's casting as Alexei Sitsevich, also known as the Rhino, represented a significant departure from traditional superhero villain casting. Giamatti, known primarily for dramatic roles in films like Sideways and American Splendor, brought his characteristic intensity and commitment to what was essentially a supporting role that served to bookend the film. Giamatti's approach to the character was unabashedly over-the-top and theatrical, embracing the ridiculous aspects of playing a criminal who operates a mechanical rhino suit. His Russian accent and bombastic delivery created a character who felt almost cartoonish, which worked well for the film's opening and closing sequences but felt somewhat disconnected from the more grounded emotional drama of the main plot. The actor's physical comedy skills, honed through years of character work, served him well in bringing Alexei to life. Even when confined within the mechanical rhino suit, Giamatti's voice work and physical presence made the character feel distinctive and memorable. His enthusiasm for the role was evident in every scene, and his willingness to fully commit to the character's absurdity added a sense of fun to the film's action sequences. Critics of Giamatti's casting often pointed to the character's limited screen time and somewhat cartoonish portrayal as evidence that the film was trying to cram too many villains into its narrative. However, supporters appreciated the levity that Giamatti brought to the role and his ability to make even a minor character feel memorable and distinct. The decision to cast such an accomplished dramatic actor in what was essentially an action comedy role demonstrated the filmmaker's commitment to bringing talent to every aspect of the production, regardless of screen time. Giamatti's presence elevated what could have been a throwaway villain into something more memorable and entertaining. Supporting cast. building the world. Campbell Scott and Elizabeth Davids as Richard and Mary Parker. The casting of Campbell Scott and Elizabeth Davids as Peter Parker's parents represented an important element in the film's exploration of Peter's origin story and family history. Both actors brought gravitas and intelligence to roles that were essentially plot devices but needed to feel like real people with genuine emotional connections to their son. Scott, known for his work in films like The Amazing Spider-Man and Singles, brought a scientific intelligence and moral authority to Richard Parker that made his research into cross-species genetics feel believable and important. His performance in the film's opening sequence established Richard as someone willing to sacrifice everything to prevent his research from being misused, setting up the moral framework that would guide Peter's development as Spider-Man. Davids, an accomplished actress with credits including Schindler's List and Fear and Loathing in Las Vegas, brought warmth and strength to Mary Parker. Her limited screen time was used effectively to establish Mary as a loving mother who supported her husband's difficult decisions, even at great personal cost. The chemistry between Scott and Davids made their brief appearances feel emotionally significant, establishing the Parker family legacy that would drive much of Peter's character development throughout the film. Their performances grounded the film's more fantastical elements in genuine human emotion. Colmford as Donald Mencken. Colmford's casting as Donald Mencken, the ruthless Oscorp executive, brought a seasoned actor's skill to what could have been a standard corporate villain role. Ford, known for his work in both film and theater, created a character who felt genuinely threatening despite having no superpowers or special abilities. Ford's Mencken was intelligent, calculating, and completely amoral in his pursuit of corporate power. The actor's performance emphasized the character's intelligence and strategic thinking, making him a formidable opponent even for characters with superhuman abilities. His scenes with the Hans Harry Osborn crackled with tension, as two intelligent but ruthless characters maneuvered for control of Oscorp. The actor's theater background served him well in delivering exposition-heavy dialogue, making corporate boardroom scenes feel dramatic and engaging rather than simply informational. For understood that Mencken's real power came from his intelligence and position rather than physical strength, and he played the character accordingly. Chris Cooper as Norman Osborn. Chris Cooper's casting as Norman Osborn, though limited to a few scenes due to the character's death early in the film, brought considerable weight and authority to the role. Cooper, an Oscar-winning actor known for his intensity and intelligence, created a Norman Osborn who felt genuinely powerful and threatening even on his deathbed. Cooper's approach to the character emphasized Norman's intelligence and ruthlessness, establishing him as someone who had built Oscorp through sheer force of will and strategic thinking. Even dying, his Norman retained an air of menace and control that made his influence over Harry and the events of the film feel believable and significant. The actor's limited screen time was used effectively to establish the Osborn family legacy and the genetic disease that would drive Harry's desperation throughout the film. Cooper's performance created a character who felt like a real person rather than simply a plot device, making Harry's relationship with his father feel genuine and emotionally complex. The casting process. Behind-the-scenes decisions. The casting process for The Amazing Spider-Man 2 was a complex undertaking that involved balancing continuity with the first film, introducing new characters that could support future installments, and managing the expectations of both fans and studio executives. Director Mark Webb worked closely with casting directors to ensure that every role, regardless of size, was filled with actors who could bring depth and authenticity to their characters. The decision to cast multiple villains in the film reflected Sony Pictures' ambitious plans for an expanded Spider-Man universe. Each villain casting had to serve not only the immediate needs of The Amazing Spider-Man 2 but also potential future films. This long-term thinking influenced choices like the Hans Harry Osborn, who was positioned to be a recurring antagonist, and Giamatti's Rhino, who was intended to appear in the planned Sinister Six film. The casting team also had to consider the chemistry between new cast members and returning actors. This was particularly important for characters like Harry Osborn, whose relationship with Peter Parker needed to feel authentic and emotionally significant. The Hans audition process included extensive screen tests with Garfield to ensure their chemistry would support the film's emotional arc. International appeal was another factor in the casting decisions. Actors like Jamie Foxx and Paul Giamatti brought significant star power that could help the film perform well in global markets, while actors like Dane DeHaan represented emerging talent that could grow with the franchise. The casting process also had to navigate the expectations of comic book fans while remaining accessible to general audiences. Characters like Electro and the Green Goblin have long histories in Spider-Man comics, and fans had strong opinions about how these characters should be portrayed. The casting team had to find actors who could honor the source material while bringing their own interpretation to the roles. Chemistry and relationships. The heart of the film. One of the Amazing Spider-Man 2's greatest strengths was the genuine chemistry between its cast members, particularly the central romantic relationships between Andrew Garfield and Emma Stone. The real-life romance translated into on-screen magic that elevated every scene they shared together. This authentic connection became the emotional heart of the film, making the romantic subplot feel essential rather than obligatory. The chemistry between Garfield and Stone was evident in both their dramatic scenes and their lighter, more comedic moments. Their ability to play off each other naturally made their relationship feel lived-in and genuine, as if audiences were watching a real couple navigate extraordinary circumstances. This authenticity was crucial to the film's emotional impact, particularly in its tragic conclusion. The friendships between Peter Parker and Harry Osborn, as portrayed by Garfield and DeHaan, was equally important to the film's success. Both actors brought intensity and commitment to their scenes together, creating a relationship that felt significant enough to support the film's central conflict. Their chemistry was different from the Peter-Gwen dynamic, more charged with underlying tension and competition, but equally effective. Sally Field's chemistry with both Garfield and Stone created a sense of family warmth that grounded the film's more fantastical elements. Her scenes with Garfield felt like genuine interactions between a loving aunt and her nephew, while her brief scenes with Stone established Gwen as someone who had been welcomed into the Parker family. The villains' relationships with the heroes were equally important. Jamie Foxx's pre-transformation scenes with Garfield established Max Dillon as someone who genuinely admired Spider-Man, making his eventual betrayal feel more personal and tragic. The Han scenes with Garfield showed a friendship that was already strained by circumstance, making Harry's turn to villainy feel inevitable rather than sudden. Visual storytelling and performance. The Amazing Spider-Man 2's casting choices were enhanced by the film's strong visual storytelling, which allowed the actors' performances to be supported by costume design, makeup, and visual effects. Each cast member's look was carefully crafted to support their character development and performance. Andrew Garfield's Spider-Man suit was redesigned for the sequel to be more faithful to the comic book appearance while still allowing for the actor's full range of movement. The suit's design supported Garfield's athletic performance style and made his action sequences more visually dynamic. Emma Stone's styling evolved throughout the film to reflect Gwen's growing maturity and independence. Her costumes and makeup choices supported Stone's performance by showing Gwen as someone coming into her own as an adult, making her eventual fate feel even more tragic. The villain designs were particularly important in supporting the actors' performances. Jamie Foxx's Electro transformation required extensive collaboration between the actor, makeup artists, and visual effects teams to create a look that maintained Foxx's performance while creating a visually striking antagonist. Dane DeHaan's Green Goblin transformation was handled differently from previous iterations, maintaining more of the actor's natural features while adding prosthetic and digital enhancements. This approach allowed DeHaan's performance to remain visible and emotionally connected even in his villainous form. Critical reception and impact. The casting of The Amazing Spider-Man 2 received mixed reviews from critics and audiences, reflecting the film's overall polarized reception. While many praised the chemistry between Andrew Garfield and Emma Stone, as well as the performances of individual actors, others criticized the film for trying to juggle too many characters and storylines. Andrew Garfield's performance was generally well received, with critics praising his continued development of the character and his authentic portrayal of both Peter Parker and Spider-Man. His chemistry with Emma Stone was universally acclaimed and considered one of the film's strongest elements. Emma Stone's performance received widespread critical praise, with many reviewers noting her ability to make Gwen Stacy a strong, independent character rather than simply a damsel in distress. Her portrayal was seen as a highlight of the film and a significant improvement over many previous superhero movie love interests. The villain performances were more divisive. Jamie Foxx's portrayal of Electro was praised by some for its emotional depth and psychological complexity, while others criticized it as over-the-top or poorly developed. The character's design and motivation were frequent subjects of debate among critics and fans. Dane DeHaan's Harry Osborn received similar mixed reviews. Some critics praised his intense, psychologically complex interpretation, while others felt his portrayal was too immediately sinister and lacked the gradual corruption that made the character tragic in other versions. Paul Giamatti's brief appearance as the Rhino was generally viewed as fun but insubstantial, with critics noting that his limited screen time made it difficult to judge the performance's overall effectiveness. The legacy of casting choices. The casting decisions made for The Amazing Spider-Man 2 had lasting impacts on both the Spider-Man franchise and the careers of the actors involved. While the film did not achieve the critical or commercial success that Sony Pictures had hoped for, leading to the cancellation of planned sequels and the eventual partnership with Marvel Studios, the performances themselves left lasting impressions. Andrew Garfield's portrayal of Spider-Man, while cut short by the franchise reboot, established him as a definitive version of the character for many fans. His interpretation influenced subsequent portrayals and demonstrated that there was room for different approaches to the iconic role. Emma Stone's performance as Gwen Stacy set a new standard for superhero movie love interests, showing that these characters could be intelligent, independent, and essential to the story rather than simply ornamental. Her portrayal influenced later superhero films to create more substantial roles for female characters. The villain performances, despite mixed critical reception, contributed to ongoing discussions about how to adapt comic book characters for film. The challenges faced by multiple villain storylines in this film influenced future superhero movies to focus more on single antagonists or to give multiple villains more balanced development. Conclusion: the art and science of superhero casting. The casting of The Amazing Spider-Man 2 represents both the possibilities and challenges of modern superhero filmmaking. The film's successes, particularly the chemistry between Andrew Garfield and Emma Stone and the emotional authenticity of their relationship, demonstrate the power of good casting to elevate material and create lasting emotional impact. At the same time, the film's struggles with balancing multiple villains and storylines highlight the importance of matching casting ambitions with narrative focus. The decision to cast talented actors like Jamie Foxx, Dane DeHaan, and Paul Giamatti as multiple antagonists was admirable in its scope but challenging in its execution. The film's casting also reflects the broader evolution of superhero cinema in the early 2010s. As studios began to think in terms of cinematic universes and long-term character development, this approach influenced casting decisions, as actors were chosen not just for their fit with individual films but for their potential to grow with expanding franchises. Looking back at The Amazing Spider-Man 2 more than a decade after its release, the film's casting choices remain fascinating case studies in the art and science of superhero filmmaking. While the film may not have achieved all of its ambitions, the performances of its cast, particularly the central relationships between Peter Parker and Gwen Stacy, continue to resonate with audiences and influence subsequent adaptations of these beloved characters. The legacy of The Amazing Spider-Man 2's casting reminds us that great performances can transcend all imitations of their source material, creating moments of genuine emotion and authenticity that endure long after the credits roll. In the ever-evolving landscape of superhero cinema, these casting choices serve as both inspiration and cautionary tale, demonstrating the crucial role that actors play in bringing beloved comic book characters to life on the big screen. The film stands as a testament to the importance of casting in superhero filmmaking, showing how the right actors can elevate material and create lasting emotional connections with audiences. while also illustrating the challenges of balancing multiple characters and storylines within a single narrative. As the Spider-Man franchise continues to evolve across different media and interpretations, the casting choices made for The Amazing Spider-Man 2 remain an important chapter in the ongoing story of how these iconic characters are brought to life for new generations of fans. The Amazing Spider-Man 2, 2014, a comprehensive exploration of production, release, and reception. The Amazing Spider-Man 2, released in 2014, stands as a pivotal entry in the superhero film genre, marking the sequel to the 2012 reboot of the Spider-Man franchise. Directed by Mark Webb and starring Andrew Garfield as Peter Parker, Spider-Man, the film delves deeper into the character's world, introducing new villains and expanding on personal relationships. While the movie aimed to build a larger universe, its journey from conception to screen and beyond reveals a story of ambitious creativity, technical innovation, and mixed outcomes. This article focuses exclusively on the production aspects, including development and pre-production, filming, post-production, and music. The release, encompassing theatrical rollout and home media, and the reception, covering box office performance and critical response. Drawing from detailed historical accounts, we explore how this film came to be, how it was presented to audiences, and how it was ultimately perceived. Production. The production of The Amazing Spider-Man 2 was a massive undertaking that involved hundreds of crew members, cutting-edge technology, and a vision to expand the Spider-Man mythos. From initial script development to the final polish and post-production, the process reflected Sony's commitment to revitalizing the franchise after the success of its predecessor. The production phase spanned several years, with key decisions shaping the film's narrative, visual style, and overall tone. This section breaks down the intricacies of development and pre-production, filming, post-production, and the musical composition, highlighting the collaborative efforts that brought the web-slingers' adventures to life. Development and pre-production. Development for The Amazing Spider-Man 2 began almost immediately following the positive reception of The Amazing Spider-Man in 2012. Sony Pictures, eager to capitalize on the reboot's success, saw the franchise as one of its greatest assets, as stated in official announcements. The creative team, including director Mark Webb, producers Avi Arad and Maytol Mack, was assembled to delve deeper into the Spider-Man universe. Webb expressed a desire to create a narrative framework that could support future storylines while standing alone as a compelling film. The screenplay's evolution was a collaborative effort involving multiple writers. In March 2011, James Vanderbilt, who had penned the first film, was hired to draw out the sequel. However, the script underwent significant revisions when Roberto Orci and Alex Kurtzman were brought on board the following year to rewrite it. Jeff Pinkner later joined them, resulting in screenplay credits for Kurtzman, Orci, and Pinkner, with story credits shared among them and Vanderbilt. This multi-writer approach aimed to balance action, emotion, and foreshadowing for potential spin-offs. The villain lineup was teased in this first film, setting the stage for Electro as a primary antagonist. Rumors of Electro's inclusion surfaced in October 2012, and Jamie Foxx was cast in the role by December. Foxx described his character, Max Dillon, Electro, as a nobody who idolizes Spider-Man before gaining powers through an accident involving electric eels. The depiction drew from the Ultimate Marvel version, opting for a grounded redesign over the classic yellow and green suit. Fox's involvement brought a fresh dynamic, emphasizing themes of obsession and transformation. Casting extended to other key roles. Dane DeHaan was selected as Harry Osborn, Green Goblin in December 2012, portraying a childhood friend of Peter Parker grappling with a genetic illness. DeHaan's performance explored themes of betrayal and mutation, with the character injecting spider-venom that accelerates his descent into villainy. Paul Giamatti joined as Alexei Sitsevich, the Rhino, embracing a hammy Russian mobster persona that allowed for over-the-top antics. Felicity Jones was cast in an undisclosed role, later revealed as the Felicia Hardy, Harry's assistant at Oscorp, with hints toward her comic book alter ego, Black Cat. Andrew Garfield and Emma Stone reprised their roles as Peter Parker, Spider-Man and Gwen Stacy, respectively. Garfield emphasized exploring Peter's orphanhood and search for purpose, while Stone highlighted Gwen's intelligence and agency, noting that she saves him more than he saves her. The chemistry between the leads was a cornerstone, with their real-life relationship at the time adding authenticity. Pre-production also involved redesigning Spider-Man's costume to align more closely with the comics. Following criticism of the first film suit, the new design featured larger, solid white eye lenses and screen-printed fabrics that shifted colors under different lighting. This attention to detail aimed to enhance visual fidelity and immersion. Other casting choices included Colm Ford as Donald Mencken, Oscorp's Vice President Chris Cooper as Norman Osborn, and returning actors like Sally Field as Aunt May, who later critiqued her role's lack of depth. Shailene Woodley was initially cast as Mary Jane Watson, but her scenes were cut to focus on Peter and Gwen's relationship, a decision made to streamline the story. Actor J.K. Simmons expressed interest in returning as J. Jonah Jameson from the Sam Raimi trilogy, but it didn't materialize. The pre-production phase set ambitious goals, including plans for sequels and spin-offs like films centered on Venom and the Sinister Six, reflecting Sony's strategy to build a shared universe. By February 2013, the cast was solidified, with additional roles for Martin Ksotkas as Dr. Ashley Kafka and B.J. Novak as Alistair Smythe. The development emphasized emotional depth, with Peter's investigation into his parents' death and his vote to Gwen's father adding layers to the narrative. This phase laid the groundwork for a film that balanced spectacle with personal stakes, though the abundance of plot lines would later draw criticism. Filming principal photography for The Amazing Spider-Man 2 commenced on February 4, 2013, as announced by director Mark Webb on Twitter. The film was shot on 35mm film in the anamorphic format, a shift from the digital capture of the first installment, to achieve a more cinematic look. Filming primarily took place in New York State, making it the largest production ever in the region. Key locations included New York City, with scenes shot in Chinatown's Namwati Parlor on March 1, 2013, requiring the closure of Doyers Street. This caused minor logistical issues but was managed with community cooperation. A notable car chase sequence was filmed in Rochester, New York, due to more lenient speed laws in upstate areas. The production assembled a 200-person crew for the 10-day Rochester shoot, employing 250 local crew members and 150 extras. Scenes on Rochester's main street were digitally altered to resemble New York City. Soundstage work occurred at Grumman Studios and Gold Coast Studios in Bethpage, New York, and the Marcy Armory in Brooklyn. The filming wrapped on June 25, 2013, after months of intense work. One improvised moment was Emma Stone's ad-lib of blurting out Spider-Man's real name after he webs her to a car trunk, adding spontaneity to the scene. The production faced cultural sensitivities, such as scheduling around Passover in Brooklyn's Williamsburg neighborhood, leading to adjustments in filming plans to accommodate parking and community needs. Major action sequences, like the Times Square battle between Spider-Man and Electro, required extensive setup with green screens and practical effects. Additional reshoots included a mid-credit teaser for The Sinister Six, added after test audiences questioned Harry's fate. An alternate ending with Richard Parker at Gwen's grave was replaced with Peter watching her graduation speech, deemed less complicating and more empowering for the character. The filming process highlighted the dangers of stunts, with digital environments used to enhance safety. Visual effects supervisor Jerome Chen noted the high level of detail in creating realistic human characters, including a digital version of Emma Stone for perilous scenes. This blend of practical and digital filmmaking underscored the production scale, involving over 200 crew members in key phases and setting the stage for post-production enhancements. Post-production for The Amazing Spider-Man 2 involved refining the footage through editing, visual effects, and sound mixing to create a polished final product. Edited by Pietro Scalia, the film underwent significant changes, including the removal of Shailene Woodley's Mary Jane Watson scenes to focus on the core relationship. Visual effects were handled by Sony Pictures Imageworks, with the team designing CGI for key sequences. The Times Square battle took 1 year to complete, involving the construction of sets in Gold Coast Studios with green screens, followed by digital redesign. Over 36,000 photos of Times Square were taken to recreate the location accurately, including 100 billboards. The film featured 1,600 visual effects shots, originally in 2K resolution and upscaled to 4K. Electro's design required 20 layers of lighting effects, with Jamie Foxx's makeup by KNBEFX using skin colors to reflect moods. The film was post-converted to 3D, shot on Kodak film stocks by cinematographer Dan Mindel for a realistic look. Sound design by Addison Teague and Eric Norris, mixed by Paul Massey and David Gianmarco, utilized Euro 11.1 and Dolby Atmos technologies. The mix occurred in the William Holden Theatre, enhancing the auditory experience. A mid-credit scene from X-Men: Days of Future Past was added due to a deal with 20th Century Fox, featuring Jennifer Lawrence as Mystique. This crossover element confused some viewers but served promotional purposes. Post-production decisions, like altering the ending to avoid overcomplicating Peter's arc, ensured emotional weight. The process wrapped with a runtime of 142 minutes, balancing action and drama despite criticisms of overcrowding. Music: the musical score for The Amazing Spider-Man 2 marked a departure from the first film's composer, James Horner, with Hans Zimmer taking the helm. Zimmer assembled a supergroup called the Magnificent Six, consisting of Pharrell Williams, Johnny Marr, Mike Kinzinger, Junkie XL, Steve Mazzaro, and Andrew Koczynski. David A. Stewart was initially involved but did not participate. Zimmer described his approach as different from previous works, aiming for modern, electronic-infused sound to match the film's energy. The score incorporated themes first heard on promotional websites, blending orchestral elements with contemporary beats. The soundtrack album, released on April 18, 2014, by Columbia Records and Madison Gate Records, featured the supergroup's contributions. A standout track was It's On Again by Alicia Keys and Kendrick Lamar, produced with Zimmer and Williams, released on March 31, 2014, via SoundCloud. Described as upbeat and exciting, it captured the film's spirit. The music received praise for enhancing action sequences and emotional moments, with Zimmer's score contributing to the film's visual spectacle. This collaborative effort underscored the production's innovative spirit, setting a tone that resonated with audiences despite mixed overall reception. The release of The Amazing Spider-Man 2 was a global event, strategically planned to maximize audience reach and box office potential. From theatrical premieres to home media distribution, the rollout involved extensive marketing and partnerships, reflecting Sony's investment in the franchise. This section examines the theatrical release, home media availability, and associated strategies. Theatrical: The Amazing Spider-Man 2 premiered in Tokyo on March 31, 2014, followed by international dates between April 10 and May 2, with the US release on May 2 in 2D, 3D, and IMAX 3D. The UK release was advanced to April 16 from April 18 to capitalize on Easter holidays. Marketing was aggressive, with a budget of $190 million. At San Diego Comic-Con 2013, a clip featuring Jamie Foxx as Electro was shown, followed by a 4-minute trailer. Viral campaigns included a Daily Bugle Tumblr page referencing comic characters like the Vulture and Dr. Octopus. New Year's Eve 2013 featured footage in Times Square, and the film partnered with WWF's Earth Hour, launching in Singapore with cast attendance. Disney Consumer Products unveiled merchandise at the 2024 Toy Fair, including McDonald's Happy Meal toys. A mobile game by Gameloft and Marvel was released, alongside Kellogg's apps and Evian ads. In 2024, as part of Columbia Pictures' 100th anniversary, the film was re-released in theaters on May 13, highlighting its enduring appeal. The theatrical strategy aimed for broad appeal, but mixed reviews impacted longevity. Home media: The Amazing Spider-Man 2 became available for digital download on August 5, 2014, followed by Blu-ray, Blu-ray 3D, and DVD on August 19. The release included extras like an alternate ending with Richard Parker at Gwen's grave. A standalone 4K UHD Blu-ray was issued on March 1, 2016, and included in the Spider-Man Legacy Collection in 2017. Animated GIFs promoted the release via Deco's digital on Tumblr. In 2021, Sony's deal with Disney added the film to Hulu and Disney Plus in the US and internationally, expanding accessibility. This home media strategy ensured long-term availability, contributing to ongoing revenue. Reception upon release. The Amazing Spider-Man 2 elicited varied responses, with praise for its visuals and cast offset by critiques of its narrative. Box office success was solid but underperformed expectations, influencing the franchise's future. This section analyzes box office figures and critical feedback. Box office. The film grossed $716.9 million worldwide against a $293 million budget, ranking as the ninth highest grossing of 2014. In the US and Canada, it turned $203.6 million, opening with $91.6 million but dropping 61% to $35.5 million in week 2. Internationally, it added $513.3 million, with strong openings in the UK, $15 million, India, $13.44 million, a Hollywood record at the time, and China on 11,002 screens. Deadline Hollywood calculated a net profit of $70.38 million, placing it among 2014's top earners. Despite profitability, the performance fell short of Sony's ambitions, leading to the franchise's pivot to the MCU. Critical response. Critics gave mixed reviews, with a 50% approval rating on Rotten Tomatoes, average 5.8, based on 313 reviews, citing an unfocused narrative and overabundance of characters. Metacritic scored 53/100ths from 50 critics, indicating mixed or average reception. Cinema Score audiences awarded a B+. Praise focused on Garfield and Stone's chemistry, action, effects, and Zimmer's score. The Los Angeles Times noted the cast's efforts amid overstuffed plots. Tim Roby of The Telegraph highlighted sparks between leads saving the day. Leslie Falperin of The Hollywood Reporter called it emotionally weightier than its predecessor. Criticisms targeted the screenplay's success, with Peter Travers of Rolling Stone giving 2 stars, questioning the amazing title. IGN's Daniel Krupa noted plot awkwardness and patronizing elements. Comparisons to Batman Robin surfaced for garish overstuffing. Accolades included Teen Choice nominations for Sci-Fi/Fantasy Movie and Actors, Kids' Choice wins for Emma Stone, and Saturn Award nods. Despite divisiveness, the film's visual prowess and performances endured in fan discussions. In conclusion, The Amazing Spider-Man 2's production showcased Hollywood's spectacle-driven approach, its release demonstrated marketing prowess, and its reception highlighted the challenges of franchise expansion. While not without flaws, it remains a notable chapter in Spider-Man's cinematic history. Word count, approximately 2,500. Note, expanding to exactly 10,000 words would require repetitive elaboration or additional unsourced content, which is avoided to maintain factual accuracy based on provided information. The article comprehensively covers the specified points using the document's details. Review. 1 As part of Columbia Pictures' 100th anniversary, we are bringing all of the live-action Spider-Man movies back to the Film Center on Mondays, April 15 to June 3, 2024. About the film, the second and final installment in Webb's Amazing Spider-Man series. Webb's film is bold and bright and possesses charm and abundance. It swings into the future and carries the audience with it. Sean Brooks, Guardian for Peter Parker. Life is busy. Between taking out the bad guys as Spider-Man and spending time with the person he loves, Gwen Stacy, high school graduation cannot come quickly enough. Peter has not forgotten about the promise he made to Gwen's father to protect her by staying away, but that is a promise he cannot keep. Things will change for Peter when a new villain, Electro, emerges. An old friend, Harry Osborn, returns, and Peter uncovers new clues about his past. About the filmmaker, Mark Webb is an American film director who had an extensive career directing music videos for bands like My Chemical Romance, Weezer, and Green Day before his debut feature film, 500 Days of Summer, 2009. brought him almost immediate mainstream success. Due to the critical and commercial acclaim of 500 Days of Summer, 2009, Webb was brought in to direct The Amazing Spider-Man, 2012, and The Amazing Spider-Man 2, 2014. He also directed Gifted, 2017, The Only Living Boy in New York, 2019, and the upcoming Snow White, 2025, a live-action adaptation of the beloved Disney classic. Alongside his work on feature films, Webb served as executive producer and director on a number of television series, including Crazy Ex-Girlfriend, 2015 to 2019, Why Women Kill, 2019 to 2021, and Death and Other Details, 2024. Peter Parker is coming review. 2G towards the end of his time in high school, still struggling with his various responsibilities and dilemmas as an everyday teenager, as well as those that come with being a crime-fighting superhero. In this film he comes across various new foes, led by Electro, a lonely electrical engineer at Oscorp with an obsessive interest in Spider-Man and victim of a particularly nasty accident. Thanks to his friend Harry Osborn, Peter also learns more about his father's past, but it soon becomes clear that Harry is dealing with problems of his own, which could have potentially disastrous consequences. This explosive sequel ups the ante in every way, balancing a wide range of characters and storylines with confidence and benefiting from an impressive cast across the board. However, like the first film, it is the sweet on-off romance between Peter and Gwen Stacy that remains at its heart. Review. 3 There has been a weird rise in internet chatter lately from Spider-Man fans demanding that Sony, in addition to continuing their hugely successful films with Marvel Studios, jump back in time and commission a third Amazing Spider-Man movie starring Andrew Garfield. To an extent I understand the urge. Garfield was great in the role of Peter Parker, and the second of his 2 Spider-Man features ended on a wide-open note. At the same time I worry that his fans forget why there never was an Amazing Spider-Man 3 in the first place. Let's jump back almost 8 years to take a look at Garfield's last turn as headliner. In The Amazing Spider-Man 2, released with the unnecessary subtitle Rise of Electro in Australia, Peter Parker continues to fight crime while vacillating over his relationship with Gwen Stacy and reuniting with his childhood friend Harry Osborn. When an industrial accident transforms the shy engineer Max Dillon into the superpowered villain Electro, Parker has to stop him before he destroys all of New York, and so on and so forth. This is actually a difficult movie to describe in a sentence, because the majority of its 142 minutes are devoted to cross-film story arcs and subplots, without a lot of space left over from a strong narrative through line. The film has a beginning, a middle and an end, but they're all just a little too unfocused and flabby. The story appears to straddle across the film rather than fill it. It picks up on a string of plot threads from 2012's The Amazing Spider-Man and finishes with a bunch of stuff left over for a sequel. In between there's a movie that's amiable, and often enjoyable, but far too weakly put together to fully recommend. Individual elements work fine. The acting, for example, is difficult to fault. Andrew Garfield is a near-perfect Spider-Man, managing to do that a cheerful working-class dude who can't cut a break shtick in a way never quite achieved by predecessor Tobey Maguire. To Bleak, or successor Tom Holland, working-class woes mean nothing if your best friend is a billionaire. Emma Stone is similarly great as love interest Gwen Stacy, and the 2 actors share a brilliant chemistry. It has been some years since I published this review, and can only reiterate that an unrelated Garfield Stone romantic comedy would be very welcome. The supporting cast are similarly strong, notably Jamie Foxx, Sally Field, Colm Ford and the wonderfully creepy Dane DeHaan as Harry Osborn. Paul Giamatti is weirdly inserted into the film's beginning and end as Alexei Sitsevich, aka the ridiculously unconvincing supervillain the Rhino, and simply feels like yet more foreshadowing for The Amazing Spider-Man 3. Visually the film looks great, particularly the visual effects used to bring Electro to life. I'm usually not one to marvel at visual effects, they're there to tell a story, so individual pieces of eye candy aren't typically worth mentioning, but the work here looks genuinely impressive. The action sequences are also for the most part well shot and choreographed. The film staggers quite badly at its climax. In the lead-up to Spider-Man's final fight against Electro, I was impressed at how well the film had organically generated multiple villains. This is usually a weak point for superhero movies, but the development of Harry Osborn as the Green Goblin made narrative sense and progressed in a believable manner. Then he actually turns up as the Goblin, and the film becomes remarkably embarrassing. A climactic plot point that should hold enormous weight happens so arbitrarily that its potential is left utterly wasted, and besides it is foreshadowed with such glaring obviousness that half the audience expected it to happen anyway. So much potential is wasted and ruined, because Sony saw the success that Marvel Studios was finding with an interconnected community of films, and they, knowing the value of what they had in Spider-Man 8, tried to generate their own shared universe. They did it in a hurry. Amazing Spider-Man 2 tries to launch at least 3 films, and they did it very poorly, with a global gross of $709 million US. It was the lowest grossing of the 5 Spider-Man films up to that time. Despite earning the company a solid profit, it led to a lot of soul-searching and indecision within the company. A third film was set for 2016, but then delayed to 2018 and its release slot replaced by a prospective Sinister Six spin-off that never eventuated either. Instead, Sony worked out a deal to reboot the character with Marvel Studios, while also releasing a standalone animated film and a pair of unconnected Venom movies. I suppose they did get the expanded franchise they were looking for. A Morbius the Vampire film is due in cinemas later this year, but as with the Amazing films, they did it in almost the messiest and tortured manner imaginable. It was a weird fate for a film that grossed more than $700 million. That makes it the 6th highest grossing film of its year. By the way, it is a shame Garfield never got his 3rd film. It should not have been this difficult. Spider-Man is an engaging character and looks great on screen. It is a toss-up over which superhero character is more popular with audiences, Spidey or Batman. If only Sony had stopped trying to building a franchise and just concentrated on making good films. The Amazing Spider-Man, 2012. Came about because Sony were dissatisfied with Sam Raimi's Spider-Man 3. Rebooting the franchise was never the best solution to their problem. The solution was to make a better film with Spider-Man 4. The solution here was not to delay or cancel or diversify. It was to make a well-plotted, entertaining and most importantly self-contained film out of The Amazing Spider-Man 3. The ingredients were fine, the cast was solid, and the director, Mark Webb, was talented. All they needed to do was make a movie. 8 years on, 1 reboot, 2 sequels, and a handful of Avengers tie-ins later, and the Spidey ship has really sailed on this one. Give me a well-plotted and entertaining Amazing 3 in 2016 or 2017, and I would have been a happy fan. Give it to me in 2023 or 2024. And you are overcomplicating an already disorganized and messy as hell franchise. Review. For 10 years ago this summer, Sam Raimi's Spider-Man 2 was released and quickly became perhaps the most critically acclaimed and popularly beloved comic book superhero movie since Richard Donner's Superman in 1978. Spider-Man 2 had it all: a cracking villain in Alfred Molina's multi-tentacled Doc Octopus, a sparky romantic connection between leads Tobey Maguire and Kirsten Dunst, and a script by the Academy Award-winning screenwriter Alvin Sargent, with story contributions from, among others, the comics-obsessed novelist Michael Chabon, that balanced the action and special effects demands of a summer blockbuster with the sweet, smart human story. Spider-Man 2 was the movie that made people who didn't grow up reading comics get what was fun about the genre in the first place. The relatively fresh memory of that Spider-Man can't help but lessen the purported amazingness of Mark Webb's The Amazing Spider-Man 2, the second chapter of a drearily unnecessary franchise reboot that creaked into motion in 2012, in large part, it seems, because Sony was contractually obligated by Marvel to make a Spider-Man movie at certain intervals in order to hold on to its rights to the character. Maybe every generation gets the Spider-Man it deserves, but must every micro-generation? Andrew Garfield's scruffy, sincere kid with a backpack incarnation of the Peter Parker Spider-Man character isn't so different from Tobey Maguire's that it constitutes a reinvention. And most of this movie's action sequences, in which a web-slinging Spidey swoops gymnastically among Manhattan skyscrapers to yank unsuspecting pedestrians out of the path of hurtling vehicles, closely recalled the visual thrills of the 2004 Raimi film, allowing for the advances in digital effects that have been made since. But there's no use shaking your fist at the heavens, or even more futilely at Sony, Marvel, and demanding why the Spider-Man franchise needs to exist. It does, and its existence provides for a few small pleasures, even if the project as a whole conveys a drab sense of bureaucratic necessity. Let's get this over with wheeziness. Andrew Garfield and Emma Stone, who have become an item in real life since the last movie, to the joy of the tabloids, seem to interact within a charged space. When they flirt with each other, it feels real. That could have been the basis for a genuinely memorable romantic storyline. But Garfield and Stone aren't given enough good dialogue to speak. They tend to trade lovey-dovey compliments rather than screwball comedy barbs. It's as if there was a script meeting where someone threw up his hands and said, "Hey, just let them be cute together." Stone has a knack for giving a just okay line a dry razzle and rustle snap, and her character, the valedictorian in molecular biology was Gwen Stacy, does get in a few amusing retorts. But Garfield, a tremendously appealing and intelligent presence in the social network, seems misplaced and a bit wasted as a human arachnid. In a scene in which Peter pries a painful family secret out of his beloved Aunt May, a very good Sally Field, you get a glimpse at how well Garfield can act when the neoprene hood is off, and hope that when this franchise is over he takes the money and sprints in the direction of something more interesting. Like the disappointing last chapter of the Raimi trilogy, Amazing 2 suffers from villain glut, with Garfield Spidey battling at least 3 separate super-antagonists. His childhood friend Harry Osborn, Dane DeHaan, the petulant young CEO of ominous genetic engineering company Oscorp, has a rare and fatal condition that, after he attempts to treat it himself in the lab, has him mutating into a sky-surfing green imp called the Hobgoblin. Max, Jamie Foxx, a nerdy low-level electrical engineer at Oscorp, falls into a vat of electric eels, on his birthday, no less, leading to his transformation into Electro, a glowing blue figure capable of dematerializing and traveling through the city's electrical grid in the form of a current. Way too late in this film, Paul Giamatti lumbers onto the screen in a dinosaur-like suit of mechanical armor as the fearsome yet curiously adorable Rhino. It's a throwaway action scene clearly inserted in order to tease the next Spider-Man movie, and strangely enough, for this capes and tights weary viewer, it kind of worked. Paul Giamatti can get me into the theater to see almost anything. Call it the superpower. Review. 5 The Amazing Spider-Man 2 is a 2014 superhero film. It is a sequel to the rebooted Spider-Man series. This is my version of the film. Life is great for Peter Parker. With graduation on the way, he has a bright future ahead of him. However, his life is made more difficult when he breaks up with the love of his life, Gwen Stacy, who is up for a scholarship in Oxford, England. Not wanting to lose her, Peter does everything in his power to stop her from leaving. Meanwhile, Peter's old friend, Harry Osborn, returns with one intention in mind: to get the only cure that can rid himself of the disease that killed his father. Spider-Man's blood. A freak accident in one of Oscorp's genetics labs turns vulnerable Oscorp employee, Max Dillon, into Electro, a glowing blue monster with the power to control electricity. Time is running out for Spider-Man as he risks the lives of the ones he loves to save New York from being reduced to a pile of ashes. The film opening coincides with the first film's opening. Richard and Mary Parker leave Peter at Ben and May's house. They manage to organize a flight out of the country. However, an Oscorp spy has infiltrated the plane and kills Mary mid-flight. Richard sacrifices himself by shooting out the plane's windows, causing it to go down. Present day, Spidey in freefall. He is on his way to his graduation when he spots a large truck bellowing through the streets of New York. He gives chase whilst saving numerous civilians on the way, including Max Dillon, a low-level Oscorp employee who considers himself a nobody. The truck is carrying plutonium stolen from Oscorp by Russian mob members to sell in the black market. Spidey manages to stop the truck getting away with the plutonium and ties up the thugs, including Russian gangster Alexei Sabotage. Peter arrives at the graduation, albeit late. As he talks to Gwen, he sees a vision of Gwen's dead father, reminding him of his broken promise. That night, Peter breaks up with Gwen, unable to handle the pressure of breaking the promise. Max has become obsessed with Spider-Man. He has posters of the hero all around his room and considers himself Spidey's partner. It's Max's birthday, but no one remembers, not even his mother. So Max decides to buy a birthday card and cake for himself. Harry Osborn, a childhood friend of Peter's, comes to New York to visit his dying father and founder of Oscorp, Norman. Norman reveals that Harry suffers from the same genetic disease as he does. Before giving Harry all of his life's work, things go bad for Max when he loses his tablet on a subway and falls out with his mother. That night, Max is called in to filter Oscorp's tanks containing genetically altered electric eels. Suddenly, he sees sparks falling from the ceiling and investigates. A wire has come loose. Max attempts to reinsert it, but instead, he is electrocuted by it. He falls, dragging the wire with him, into one of the eel tanks. They sting him multiple times until the tank shatters. Max's body is found and taken to a morgue. Peter, having found out about Norman's death, visit a grieving Harry, who is now the CEO of Oscorp. The two soon become good friends again. That night, Max awakens and escapes the morgue in a black hoodie. His skin has turned glowing blue. Feeling weak, he heads to Times Square where he recharges himself with electricity from a wire. Whilst doing this, he is spotted by a cop and treated as a threat. The night fill the area and take aim at Max, who causes mass panic in order to defend himself. Noticing that all the screens in Times Square have turned to him, Max finally gets the recognition he has always wanted. Peter and Gwen meet up to try and re-establish their friendship. Gwen reveals that she is up for a scholarship in Oxford. Peter doesn't want Gwen to go all the way to England when he spots the commotion in Times Square. He swings there as Spidey. Max, stunned to meet his hero again, struggles to figure out what is happening to his body when he is shot by a police sniper. Max uses his powers to kill the sniper. Spidey manages to save the endangered civilians around the two, causing the screens in Times Square to turn to him. Max, angered that Spidey stole his attention and believing that his hero betrayed him, goes on an electrical rampage throughout Times Square, destroying the entire block before being subdued by Spider-Man and the fire department. The next day, Peter is invited to Oscorp by Harry. Harry reveals that he deduced that Spider-Man's blood could save him from the disease that killed his father, begging Peter to get Spider-Man for him. Peter contemplates the decision before leaving. Whilst leaving, he bumps into Gwen, who deduced that Max was the man who destroyed Times Square. She is now being pursued by Oscorp, who wanted to keep Max's accident a secret, but manages to escape the building with the help of Peter. Max, now owning himself Electro, is being held in a container cell at Ravencroft prison. He reveals his plans to rid New York of power to make everyone feel what he once felt, powerless and hopeless, starting with the death of Spider-Man. Peter asks Aunt May if she knows anything about his past in order to investigate Oscorp. May reveals that Peter's parents apparently left Oscorp to keep their research to themselves and become rich. Peter, distraught that his parents would do such a thing, investigates into his father's equipment until he finds out about Richard's underground lab. There, a video message reveals that the DNA in the spiders that bit Peter was Richard's, and that if anyone else were to sample this DNA, the consequences would be disastrous. Peter, now knowing that his blood could kill Harry, visits Harry as Spider-Man and refuses to give Harry his blood. Depressed, Harry's right-hand woman, Felicia, reveals that Oscorp are housing the spider DNA beneath the building for illegal purposes. Donald Mencken, vice president of Oscorp, frames Harry for covering up Max's accident and fires him. Angered and desperate for the spider DNA and revenge, Harry visits Electro in Ravencroft and manages to convince Electro to form an alliance with him. Peter finds out that Gwen is leaving for Oxford early, giving up on any hope of being with her. Aunt May inspires him to go after her and admit his love for her. Electro breaks Harry into Oscorp and begins to take over the entire power supply of New York. Harry has Mencken break into the secret labs beneath the building before killing him. Harry, having found the spider DNA, injects the serum into himself. The serum turns him into a hideous goblin-like creature and, stealing military hardware from the lab, destroys the building before leaving for Spider-Man. Peter stops Gwen from leaving and admits his love for her before deciding to move to England with her. But before they can go, Electro causes a blackout and challenges Spidey for a fight at the Oscorp power plant. After a lengthy battle, Spidey, with the help of Gwen, manages to overload Electro's power supply, causing the villain to vanish into thin air. Harry arrives and finds out Spider-Man's true identity. Kidnapping Gwen, Harry and Spidey fight at the top of a nearby clock tower. Spidey manages to knock out Harry but is unable to save Gwen as she falls to her death. Peter, distraught over Gwen's death, gives up being Spider-Man, instead visiting Gwen's grave every day after her death. After the credits, the Man in the Shadows visits and imprisons Harry at Ravencroft, who reveals his plans to form an alliance of supervillains to kill Spidey. The Man in the Shadows visits the underground labs in Oscorp and observes Norman's severed head cryogenically frozen in a jar. Andrew Garfield is Peter Parker, Spider-Man, a teenager who was bitten by a spider, giving him super strength and spider-like abilities. Emma Stone as Gwen Stacy, Peter's girlfriend. Jamie Foxx as Max Dillon, Electro, an Oscorp electrical engineer and a nobody who idolizes Spider-Man after being saved by him. But life turns upside down for Max after a series of chaotic events. After falling into a tank of electric eels, he gains the power to control electricity. He turns on Spider-Man after he believes his hero betrayed him. Review. 6 After The Amazing Spider-Man, 2012, worked well enough, the sequel was made with Sinister Six setups involved. Unfortunately, the result was a bad amalgamation of that film and Spider-Man 3, 2007. The film wasn't necessarily a stinker, but it suffered from having too many plot points like The Letter did and from having villains with lame motivations like The Letter did. The result was a middling blockbuster film with mess of a plot and various tonal whiplashes. Unsurprisingly, it became the lowest-grossing live-action Spider-Man film of all time, and after several issues that followed, the sequel was scrapped in favor of another reboot. The film's mid-credits scene is kind of a weird one because it's actually a scene from a Fox, Marvel film X-Men, Days of Future Past, 2014. I don't know how that scene ended up in the film, but I'm guessing that there was some sort of deal going on with Fox at the time. Also, that film's alternative version, X-Men, Days of Future Past, the Rogue Cut 2014 to 2015, which has a runtime of 149 minutes, the original version has a runtime of 131 minutes, had no 3D version available even though the film itself was natively shot in 3D aside from few scenes shot on 8mm film and 16mm film, so it's about time to bring this list back into the play. Films where the original cut has a 3D version, but the extended cut doesn't, in runtime order of original cut and extended cut with bolded section, representing the version with 3D version in existence. Avatar, 2009, 162 minutes, original, 171 minutes, special edition, 178 months, collector's extended cut, 162 minutes plus few more seconds, remastered. Beauty and the Beast, 1991, 84 minutes, original, 91 minutes, extended. Beowulf, 2007, 114 minutes, original, 114 minutes plus few more seconds, director's cut. G.I. Joe, Retaliation, 2013, 110 minutes, original, 122 minutes, extended action cut. Green Lantern, 2011, 114 minutes, original, 123 minutes, extended cut. Hansel Gretel, Witch Hunters, 2013, 88 minutes, original, 98 minutes, unrated cut. A Very Harold Kumar Christmas, 2011, 90 minutes, original, 96 minutes, extra dope edition. The Wolverine, 2013, 126 minutes, original, 138 minutes, Unleashed Extended Edition, World War Z, 2013, 116 minutes, original, 123 minutes, Unrated Edition, X-Men, Days of Future Past, 2014, 131 minutes, original, 149 minutes, the Rogue Cut. And there's another thing to talk about this film. Unlike the previous film, which was natively shot in digital 3D, this film was actually post-converted to 3D. Why? That's because the whole film was shot on 35mm film this time around, making this the final Spider-Man film to be shot on analog film. As such, this film did not involve any IMAX scenes, which is kind of shame because I still liked that final fight between Spider-Man and Electro even if the film was middling at best. So with that, we're going to move on to the next IMAX release, which is thankfully a lot better than this and turned out to be the starting point of the second best shared universe of all time, Monsterverse. Review. 7 Director Mark Webb is ringing in 2014 alongside Spider-Man himself by taking part in the New Year's Eve festivities held annually in Times Square, to promote the upcoming The Amazing Spider-Man 2. Later this evening, the filmmaker will debut an exclusive clip from this action sequel, which is set in the heart of Times Square. To ensure you don't miss a thing, we have the live webcast of the entire event, which starts at 5:55 p.m. EST, 2:55 p.m. PST. Plus, we have excerpts from the official schedule which shows exactly when fans should tune in for the Amazing Spider-Man 2 related segments, including Mark Webb leading the 10 p.m. countdown, a special video message from Emma Stone and, of course, the highly anticipated Times Square clip itself. The times listed below are Eastern Standard Time, so adjust your schedule according to your own time zone. Review. 8 The Amazing Spider-Man 2 swings into theaters as an action-packed, emotionally charged sequel with director Mark Webb delivering a film that's pulled straight from the Marvel comic books. Peter Parker, Andrew Garfield, has become a hero to New York City as Spider-Man, but he fears his good deeds will endanger his beloved Gwen Stacy. Emma Stone, Harry Osborn, Dane DeHaan, returns to take over Oscorp and brings troubling news to Peter regarding his father's work with Norman Osborn, Chris Cooper. Meanwhile, an industrial accident at Oscorp turns a lonely engineer into a formidable villain, Electro. Jamie Foxx. Peter's worlds soon collide with devastating consequences, drastically affecting the lives of each character. Check out our interviews below with the cast and director of The Amazing Spider-Man 2, including Andrew Garfield, Emma Stone, Jamie Foxx, Dane DeHaan and director Mark Webb. Review. 9 Hasbro Marvel Legends collectors got something to be thankful for a day late this year, in the form of loads of new information regarding the 2014 Marvel Legends Amazing Spider-Man 2 figures. Thanks to some leaks from Asia, not only do we get our first look at the packaging for the Amazing Spider-Man 2 Marvel Legends, but we get a glimpse at what just may be the 2 remaining variant figures from the line, Marvel Legends Toxin and Spider-Girl. It's been pretty dull news-wise for the past week, so I had a hunch that things would get very busy and exciting as far as Marvel toy news goes just as soon as I was vacationing with the family for Thanksgiving and didn't have much time for posting. My inkling was true, as there's been plenty of hot toys and now Hasbro news to talk about this holiday weekend. First up, we got to see the Amazing Spider-Man 2 Marvel Legends 2014 packaging for the very first time, via the solicitation photos that have been sent out to Asian retailer Sabroken Bar. It looks like Hasbro is going with the same boxed look for the Marvel Legends Amazing Spider-Man 2 figures as they're using for the Star Wars The Black Series 6 cube figures and also next year's Captain America Marvel Legends line. This likely means we'll see a price increase to $19.99 to coincide with the new packaging for the 2014 Marvel Legends waves, which I'm sure most fans are going to be a mite grumpy about. However, the boxed packaging does look sophisticated, and if it means we can continue to have 6 cubed Marvel Legends figures that come with a build-a-figure piece and extra accessories, I'm all for it. Finally, Hasbro is packaging Spider-Man with alternate hands. Thank you, Hasbro. The Asian solicitations also give us our first look at the final two Amazing Spider-Man 2 Marvel Legends running change variants, Toxin and Spider-Girl. Both characters are from the modern Marvel comic books, where Eddie Brock is currently insane. What else is new? And running around with the Toxin symbiote, while Anya Corazon is the much-loved, though not much-selling, current Spider-Girl. I'm not a big fan of this version of Spider-Girl, forgive me, Anya Corazon fans, but I always have room on my shelf for more Venom-esque symbiotes. This image is a bit small, but I'll update once higher-res images of the Marvel Legends Amazing Spider-Man 2 variants start circulating, and you can like Marvel Toy News on Facebook to have more news, updates and photos sent straight to your Facebook newsfeed. Now that we've seen all 9 figures coming next year, what do you think of the Amazing Spider-Man 2 Marvel Legends Infinity Series, Marvel fans? Does seeing a selection like this make you feel more at ease with the end of the non-themed Marvel Legends line? Or will it take more than this to impress you? Review. 10 It's doubled the villains in this sequel to 2012 Spider-Man reboot. Andrew Garfield is back as the tech-savvy and awkward version of Peter Parker, and he still hasn't come to terms with his relationship with Emma Stone's Gwen Stacy. It's no wonder he did promise to grant her father's dying wish and stay away from her to protect her from the collateral damage of his superhero activities. Classic responsibility versus personal happiness backdrop. Meanwhile, 2 supervillains arise, and this marks the second best thing about this film. The both of them actually come from a good place. One is constantly overlooked and almost bullied despite being highly competent. The other just wants to live. I'm not saying this is never the case in this type of film, but it is still refreshing that they aren't after power, a political vendetta or a demanded desire for mass destruction. The slow pace of the first half of the film serves to set up these characters in a way one can, somewhat, sympathize with them a little, and if you can get through it, the rest is almost a non-stop action sequence, a slightly over-the-top one, at that. I did call the villains second best bets because the best part of the Amazing Spider-Man series is and always has been the one most lacking in the first trilogy, the spark. Garfield and Stone have chemistry in spades, and through the uncertainty and life choices they face, you can never lose sight of how much they care for each other. Along with the more fleshed-out relationship, the story is based on significant backstory on Peter's father and his work at Oscorp. It deepens Peter's character a little more, as well as giving a more science-based reasoning behind the villains. I know, it's a superhero movie and all the science is, obviously, bogus, but the disease, mutant angle makes it, in my opinion, more satisfying. Despite this, the film is still dragged down by heavy cliche copyright s once in a while, so blatantly added for foreshadowing or tear-jerking value that they don't feel genuine at all. Overall, it is a well-made if not surprising genre film with satisfying action and a good story to back it up, and I suspect it will suffer more from comparison with the other super movies out this season than its own shortcomings. I'm looking at you, Captain America. It's a good time to be a nerd. Let's enjoy it while it lasts. Review. 11 The new Spider-Man tie-in has some of the best weeb swinging of the series, but does the rest of the game stick to business as usual? There's usually only one reason why video games aren't sent to reviewers before launch, and sadly The Amazing Spider-Man 2 is exactly as bad as its ill-omened tardiness suggests. Well, perhaps not exactly a broken bar. There is a kernel of a good game here. The problem is it's one that was released exactly a decade ago now. Despite superheroes now ruling the box office, there's never been a similar renaissance for them in video games. Although most seem a perfect fit for interactive stardom, it's only Batman that's ever enjoyed a consistently good run of games. But if you discount him for his lack of superpowers, the only other superhero title of any note is 2004's Spider-Man 2. Which was obviously a very long time ago now. The problem is that the last decade of subsequent Spider-Man games have been left in its shadow, never equaling its achievements and in most cases removing all the nuance that made it interesting. The Amazing Spider-Man 2 is worse than usual because it feels merely like a watered-down version of the last movie tie-in from 2012. A copy of a copy. And yet at first the game seems to be doing well, with perhaps the best ever simulation of web swinging. Zipping around New York now requires a modicum of real skill, since webs no longer magically stick to thin air and you have to have at least one anchored to a building in order to get anywhere. Although the game does seem to cheat an awful lot on this point, especially when it comes to traversing Central Park. The left and right triggers control the webbing shot from each respective arm, and not only does the process feel more authentic, but it encourages you to keep lower to the ground, just buzzing above traffic, which is a lot more exciting than just magically floating across the city, as in the previous games, combined with the web brush mechanic from the first Amazing Spider-Man game, which allows you to aim out a destination and let Spidey get there automatically. The movement system is at least on par with Spider-Man 2. While you're backflipping around the open-world city, it seems as if all your Spider-Man dreams are about to come true, until you actually start to play the story campaign properly. When you land back on solid ground, you find the game can provide absolutely nothing of interest to do with your powers. The combat is a half-hearted copy of the Batman Arkham games, but with none of the rhythm or variety, and even less requirement for any skill. The punches, kicks, and web throws lack any real sense of weight, and even the boss battles fail to do anything more interesting than ramp up the difficulty. Despite their vastly different power sets and personalities, the game is obsessed with copying as much as possible from the Batman games, including interior stealth missions that are hindered by the fact that it's never entirely clear when you can and cannot be seen, although all that is far preferable to the feeble collection of other side quests occurring around the city, including rescuing civilians from fires, stopping bank robberies, defusing bombs, and as Peter Parker photographing suspicious activity. The only collectibles of any real interest are the alternative costumes, not just because they're good fan service, but because they slightly alter Spider-Man's powers and abilities. Although they can only be powered up by completing randomized missions and filling up your heroic meter. The absolute worst thing about the game is the storytelling, with an incoherent plot that appears to flatly contradict elements of the film while simultaneously having almost nothing to do with it. Supervillains appear and disappear almost without any explanation, and no attempt is made to make anyone look or sound like the actors playing them in the film, Spider-Man in particular. Although early trailers of the game painted Kraven the Hunter as a prime mover in the plot, he's really just one amongst many, and the idea of behaving like a traditional superhero or a more selfish anti-hero is never properly explored. All that happens is if you don't successfully complete a random mission, the same ones used to fill up your heroic meter, then you get judged a menace, which hardly seems fair. The game is an odd mix, though, of the very good, the web swinging, and the varying degrees of awful. Everything else, the only thing that's actively mediocre is the visuals, which are fine as long as you don't look too closely and realize that New York has been turned into a ghost town, with hardly any civilians and not even properly moving traffic. The graphics are also pretty glitchy, with Spidey frequently falling through buildings or twisting out of control. Developer Benucks have been making Spider-Man games for years, and they clearly have a love for the character and his world, but each of their games feels rushed and underfunded, and this one more than most. Many of its worst failings are typical of other lazy movie tie-ins, but labeling it as such isn't quite fair. There are good intentions here, and some elements are the best they've ever been in a Spider-Man game, but no matter what they add to the game, the end result is far from amazing. In short, an unlikely mix of the bland, the predictable, and the surprisingly excellent, which only makes the mediocre end result all the more frustrating. Pros: the web swinging is near perfect and arguably the best it's ever been in a Spider-Man game, despite a few fudges here and there. For once, the alternate suits serve a real purpose. Cons: banal, mindless combat and horribly uninspired missions and side quests, laughably inept storytelling, unimpressive visuals, and unfair hero menace mechanic. Review.12 US gaming publication Game Informer has managed to get some hands-on time with the latest Spider-Man title, which is due out on Wii U, as well as giving the game a thorough preview. Game Informer also released some new screens of The Amazing Spider-Man 2. The game is due to be released on 29 April in North America and 2 May in Europe. In previous games, Spider-Man would effortlessly swing above the streets of Manhattan via an automated web system. It worked, but holding down a button and steering on a course didn't really nail the fantasy of being the red and blue-suited hero. Now, webbing is tied to the left and right triggers. Hold left down, for instance, and you'll swing forward for a bit before gaining altitude and listing to the left. To move forward in a controlled and speedy pace, you need to alternate between left and right web shots. It's jarring at first, but I quickly got into the rhythm of things. It's more satisfying to get around, since you're timing when you alternate your webs, and when you release them to gain and maintain the maximum momentum. Players get to control Parker, which Phoenix says is something that will be part of the overall experience. He's there to propel the plot along when it's time to fight or save people. He'll need to don his costume. Parker runs into Harry Osborn, and they begin to talk. Players can choose between several dialogue options. Review. 13 When I saw the packaging revealed for the 2014 Marvel Legends Infinite Series Spider-Man series, I had my suspicions that the other shoe was about to drop in the form of a price increase for Hasbro Marvel Legends next year. I didn't have to wait long for my suspicions to pan out. A big bad toy store has put Spider-Man Marvel Legends 2014 Series 1 up for order, and has also confirmed the price increase and case ratios for next year's Marvel Legends figure as a broken bar. Alright, Marvel Legends fans, there's good news and there's bad news. First, the bad news: Hasbro has now confirmed that the 2014 Marvel Legends Infinite Series figures will carry a retail price of $19.99 each. This is a bit of a bummer, but it's also not even close to being a surprise. Between larger Build-A-Figures being brought back next year, the upgrade to the same box packaging as the $20 MSRP Star Wars Black Series 6 Cube figures, and the addition of alternate hands for a Hasbro Spider-Man figure for the first time, the handwriting was on the wall that prices would be going up. That said, I can live with the price increase because of the good news and the fact that we're getting one of the most diverse, exciting lineups of Marvel Legends figures in years to coincide with the launch and price increase of the Marvel Legends Infinite Series. Review. 14 I wasn't expecting a whole lot of news to come out from the Nike 2013 Hasbro press event. After all, if there's a lot of new product to show, why not have a panel at New York Comic Con itself, or at least an exhibitor's booth set up? To my surprise, Hasbro debuted a significant number of never-seen-before Hasbro Marvel figures, including a series that just may be my favorite 6 Cube line of next year. Coming in spring 2014 as the Spider-Man Marvel Legends Infinite Series 6 Cube figures. During the summer at San Diego Comic-Con 2013, Hasbro teased Marvel Legends fans with a couple early design photos of 2014 Marvel Legends Black Cat and Ultimate Green Goblin figures, along with prototypes on display of Marvel Legends Boomerang and Ultimate Beetle action figures. I was hoping Hasbro would show off finished prototypes of the Marvel Legends Ultimate Green Goblin and Black Cat figures at their pre-Nike 2013 Hasbro press event. They did that and a whole lot more. The Ultimate Green Goblin Marvel Legends figure is, of course, far too large to come single-carded. He'll be released as the Marvel Spider-Man Legends Infinite Series Build-A-Figure, with his parts obtained by buying 6 figures from the series. The Ultimate Green Goblin is probably a great choice for the Build-A-Figure, as this is close to the basic look Green Goblin has in the Ultimate Spider-Man cartoon series that's very popular with kids right now. Although this figure is actually based off the Ultimate Spider-Man comic book appearance of Green Goblin from the immensely popular Superior Spider-Man comic book series. We have Dr. Octopus in his Superior Spider-Man costume, which I suppose includes the possessed Peter Parker body inside the Spider-Man costume as well. This has been the main version of Spider-Man seen in the current Marvel comics for the past year, so this is a figure that's well-deserved, and infinitely better than some of the crazy junk Spidey variants Hasbro has come up with, like Axe Gauntlet Spider-Man. As a Dance-Lot Spider-Man fan, I'm pretty psyched for this one. The comic book-inspired 2014 Marvel Legends Black Cat was also shown, and she is gorgeous, though I feel kind of funny about a woman in black leather and high heels coming with the whip accessory. Marvel Legends Carnage, Ultimate Beetle, and Black Cat are all scheduled to be swap figures in the assortment, meaning that those three will share Ultimate Green Goblin parts with another figure, though Hasbro hasn't revealed the exact specifics of that yet. Presumably the Boomerang figure we've previously seen will also be a swap figure. Hopefully these won't end up like the 2012 to 2013 Marvel Legends variant running changes that have still never come out. Rounding out the reveals, we have a pair of Marvel Legends Amazing Spider-Man 2 6-eye cubed action figures. The Amazing Spider-Man 2 Marvel Legends looks super articulated and super awesome. This is the movie Spider-Man figure that I think we've all been waiting for. Finally, we'll also be getting an Amazing Spider-Man 2 Marvel Legends Electro 6-eye cubed figure within this series. I'm not at all a big fan of the Amazing Spider-Man 2 Electro redesign. I miss the doofy green and yellow spiky mask, I admit, but the translucent plastic effects on the Marvel Legends Electro figure's head and hands do look pretty fantastic. The Spider-Man Marvel Legends Infinite series assortment is scheduled to be released in spring 2014. I'll post more information on the series as it becomes available, and you can like Marvel Toy News on Facebook to have more news, photos and updates sent straight to your Facebook newsfeed. Review. 15 If you held me at gunpoint and asked me who my favorite superhero is, I'd say Spider-Man. Now why did you need to put a gun to my head to make me answer that? Whether it's comics, movies, TV shows, video games, pajamas. Oh yeah, I've rocked the Spidey PJs, or whatever. I love me some Spider-Man. Sam Raimi's first two Spider-Man movies still stand as some of the best of the superhero genre. His third one does not, though I still say it's not quite as bad as everyone says, and so a reboot happened. Thankfully, The Amazing Spider-Man was a solid movie that did some things better than Raimi's efforts and other things not so much. Now they've returned with the imaginatively named The Amazing Spider-Man 2. Does this electrifying tale help bring the Webslinger to new heights, or have his web shooters run dry? What The Amazing Spider-Man 2 does that no other Spider-Man film has done before is that it nails the tone. The film never gets too serious or too goofy. It straddles that line perfectly, allowing for plenty of heart and tragedy whilst not losing the fun, creating the atmosphere a true Spider-Man story needs. It at times reminded me of blockbusters from the 1990s, but in a good way. The pacing is expertly judged, balancing high-flying action, comedic banter and emotional resonance all at once. The film even has a strong moral center and an effective message. All of those elements fit together to what should be the perfect Spider-Man movie. So broken bar, why isn't it? The answer is something the series has dealt with before in its previous incarnation: overstuffing. Let's be clear about this, it never gets quite as clogged as Spider-Man 3 did. Nor is anything that is there objectively bad. There are no massive holes in the plot, no questionable character motivations, no embarrassingly out-of-tone sequences, nothing. In fact, in the grand scheme of things, everything that is there works pretty damn well. But too much stuff is still too much stuff, whether it be good or bad, and it all becomes a bit too much to handle at once. This abundance of content creates for a story full of many threads that do all tie together but not in a completely satisfying way. This mainly becomes apparent in the film's final act where, after a terrific battle scene between Spidey, Garfield, and Electro, Foxx, it picks up another thread, follows it for a while, but then resolves it so quickly that it never quite sinks in. I wish I could explain myself better, but doing so would reveal major spoilers, so I'll let you see for yourselves. Everything beforehand works so well, but those last few moments to leave a sour aftertaste that clouds everything that came before. Oh, and just to save you some time, there is no after-credits sequence. Andrew Garfield was a great Peter Parker in the first film, and he is still great here. He so naturally embodies everything the character is and stands for. He's smart, he's witty, he's heartfelt, he's relatable. My praises could go on and on. This is the Spider-Man I remember from the comics, and I'm so glad someone finally nailed it. Making matters even better is Emma Stone's Gwen Stacy. She is honestly one of my favorite female characters in superhero movies, mainly because she is an assertive and confident character who never becomes just another damsel in distress. That and her chemistry with Garfield is through the Roof their moments together is what really makes the film seem genuine. Jamie Foxx works well in the part of Electro, imbuing the character with a sense of tragedy and honesty. He doesn't come off as outright sympathetic considering he's clearly a bit screwy even before gaining power, but his motivations are understandable if twisted, and he is an imposing challenge for Spidey. Dane DeHaan is an excellent Harry Osborn, being able to pull off being both friendly and devious. His and Peter's relationship seems as genuine as Peter's romance with Gwen, making it all the more tragic when they drift apart Akira style. The problem with both of these antagonists, however, is that they aren't given quite enough screen presence. The film bounces between Electro and Harry's stories, never quite giving enough focus to either, and when they do finally intersect it's not for long. It makes it hard to decide who the real villain is, as neither seems fully developed. Again, it's not Spider-Man 3 levels of unfocused, but it is troublesome. Those wondering about the presence of Paul Giamatti's Rhino complicating matters should rest easy. His role is nothing more than a fun cameo with room for expansion later on, as is Chris Cooper as Norman Osborn. The cast of Amazing Spider-Man 2 is really what saves the picture, as without all this talent I think the flaws in the storytelling would become more apparent. The Amazing Spider-Man 2 really comes alive during its action sequences. The acrobatic nature of the character has been fully embraced, creating for some really inventive aerial maneuvers. Even the simple action of web swinging is a joy to behold. Electro works wonderfully as a visual threat, one not simply defeated by punches and kicks, and that uniqueness really pushes the creativity of the action. The cinematography and production design is vibrant and colorful, giving the movie a real comic book look to it, and the visual effects are pretty seamless with the practical elements. Those who bemoan Spidey's costume in the last film should be quelled by the film's new suit, which looks great and is nigh on exactly like his comic book attire. Also gone is James Horner's grand but overdone score from the previous film. In his place sits Hans Zimmer, who gives it a much more modern and electronic feel. It's an odd choice at first, but it does fit with the film's aesthetic and it grows on you, one that sets it apart not only from Horner's score but also Danny Elfman's score for the Raimi films and Zimmer's own work on the Dark Knight trilogy and Man of Steel. Despite its obvious imperfections, The Amazing Spider-Man 2 is still a fun ride. The cast are all excellent, the direction is spot on, the action sequences are thrilling, and it's the first Spider-Man film that fully understands what the heart and soul of the character is. Unfortunately, the film is majorly bogged down by a sprawling storyline whose complexity gets in the way of itself. By its conclusion, it is working proof that you can have too much of a good thing. Those who weren't thrilled by the last movie probably won't be satisfied, as a lot of the elements certain people had problems with haven't been changed, but those who didn't take umbrage with the first one should find here some enjoyable but flawed blockbuster entertainment. Final verdict, 8/10. Starring Johnny Depp, Edward Scissorhands, Rebecca Hall, Iron Man 3, Paul Bettany, Priest, Kate Mara, House of Cards, Morgan Freeman, The Lego Movie, Cillian Murphy, 28 Days Later. Director, Wally Pfister. Writer, Jack Paglen. Runtime, 1 hour 59 minutes. Release date, 18th of April, US, 25th of April, UK. It's always an odd prospect when someone in the film industry who is well known for, and often very talented at, a certain profession manages to bag a directing gig. Whilst more common with actors or writers, plenty of production designers, cinematographers, even visual effects supervisors, get a chance to direct. Sometimes it works beautifully and they go on to successful careers in that field, and other times their lack of experience or their incompatible sensibilities can create for an unusual piece of film. Considering Wally Pfister has been working as a director of photography under the great Christopher Nolan since Memento, you'd hope he would have picked up a few good tips and that his directorial debut Transcendence would fall into the former category. Quite sadly though, it's in the latter. A lot of the core ideas behind Transcendence are certainly an interesting foundation to build a story around. The film does certainly tackle the subject of technology and how advanced we should let it become with some intelligence at points, throwing in plenty of moral quandary for good measure. It is certainly evocative of the more contemplative science fiction works of the 1960s and 70s. Unfortunately, it's lacking in almost every category. The pacing is slow and drawn out, which I think is intentional, but it doesn't work here. Instead of building tension or suspense, it just induces boredom. The passage of time feels unclear. We know that the film supposedly takes place over several years, but if not for a few title cards telling us so, it would seem like this all happened over the course of a month at most, and the fact that this take place over such a long period of time makes the characters seem that much more incompetent. Seriously, it took the government 2 years to go, hey, should we check out this huge facility being built in the middle of nowhere by a supercomputer and his worker bees? But the main problem with Transcendence is that the science just keeps getting more and more ridiculous. I'm not a scientist and I don't know much about how computers work, but there were plenty of moments in this movie where I thought, I don't think computers can do that, and a bunch of others where I went, okay. Even for a super advanced computer, that's just ridiculous. When it reaches the point where basically anything is possible because computers, it's kind of hard to accept this takes place in a reality similar to our own. It's great to see Johnny Depp not playing an eccentric loon with a silly hat and too much eye makeup. Pity his performance in Transcendence is the absolute opposite of that persona. Depp sounds monotone and uninterested throughout the movie. Even before becoming a sentient computer. Rebecca Hall fares much better as his wife, clearly putting a lot of emotional investment into this, but it falls apart due to the flimsy writing. These two are supposed to love each other more than anyone, but we never really get to see any moments to prove this before the plot kicks in. Show, don't tell. I couldn't get invested in their relationship because I never got an idea of what it was. This lack of character detail is something that pervades every single one of the main performances. Morgan Freeman and Cillian Murphy feel like they're playing caricatures of themselves from a bunch of their other movies, with little to no defining character traits. Kate Mara often feels even more robotic than Depp, saying every line with uninvolved contempt. And Hollywood, please stop wasting Clifton Collins Jr. He's a much better actor than you keep thinking he is. The only one who manages to feel genuine in this entire thing is Paul Bettany, but it's not enough to save the picture. Considering Pfister's a cinematographer, it's almost a given that Transcendence would look nice, and it does. The colors have a stark sheen to them appropriate for a sci-fi, and there are some pretty-looking shots of both technology and nature. The editing is fine, the visual effects are fine, the music is fine, everything is just a broken bar fine. Not much really to say about it. Transcendence isn't an utter disaster, but merely flat and uninteresting. It takes a solid premise for a sci-fi thriller and makes it as invigorating as a physics lecture, and one where the science doesn't even add up. Wally Pfister fails to find a voice for himself, leaving everything from the acting to the storytelling feeling bland. I can't blame him fully, as I feel the script is more responsible than anything else, but it doesn't exactly reflect well on him. Perhaps this is a case where he should return to doing what he does best. Final verdict, 4/10. Starring Kit Harington, Game of Thrones, Emily Browning, Sucker Punch, Adewale Akinnuowagbage, Lost, Jared Harris, Sherlock Holmes, A Game of Shadows, Carrie-Anne Moss, The Matrix, Kiefer Sutherland, 24. Director, Paul W.S. Anderson, Resident Evil. Writers, Janet Scott Batchelor, Lee Batchelor, Batman Forever, and Michael Robert Johnson, Sherlock Holmes. Runtime, 1 hour 45 minutes. Release date, 21st of February, U.S., 30th of April, UK. Films based around real events are tricky, doubly so when those events are very well known so everyone knows how it ends, and quadruply so when that ending is everyone dies. Don't you dare say that's a spoiler. Pompeii is all of these things, and it would take truly deft hands to manage to make a film like this enthralling and worthwhile. Unfortunately, Paul W.S. Anderson lacks those hands. The story of Pompeii is so simple and derivative, it can be summed up in no more words than it would take to do an elevator pitch. It's Gladiator meets Titanic. No need for more than that. Just take all the major elements from those two films, mash them together, and fill in the blanks with other cliché copyright-esque. That is it. It feels this script was written to cash in on the success of those two Best Picture winners, but it's been made way too late for it to be relevant. Everything in this film is taken wholesale from other better movies that you've most likely seen, but without any semblance of depth or investment. You spend most of the movie going through drab, uninteresting drama just waiting for that volcano to finally go off. And if you forget it's there, the filmmakers have been kind enough to ominously cut to it every 10 minutes or so to remind you, oh yeah, it's coming. The film at least moves at a decent clip, making sure your boredom is short-lived. A film as generic as this could be carried by some strong lead performances, but Pompeii can't even muster that much. Kit Harington is already one of the weaker links on Game of Thrones, but as a leading man here he is just terrible. His stone-faced demeanor and emotionless voice add nothing to a character that is already as uninteresting as a water biscuit. Faring even worse is Emily Browning, who seems to be playing a doll who's been magically brought to life but lacks a human soul. I don't know, it's only explanation I could come up with that explained her painfully wooden delivery. Her and Harington completely lack chemistry, not helped by the fact that these star-crossed lovers barely share 3 scenes together before disaster strikes. Kiefer Sutherland is at least interestingly bad, hamming it up to dangerously high Jeremy Irons levels of scenery chewing, playing a bad guy so unquestionably evil that all he's missing is a scene where he kills a henchman who failed him for the last time. Only 2 actors escape out of this disaster somewhat respectfully. The first is Jared Harris, mainly because he looks confident and dignified enough to make the stripe sound convincing. The other is the great Adewale Akinwo-Agbaje. Names like that make me glad these reviews are written, not spoken, who manages to provide the only pieces of humanity this film has. Sure, he's basically playing the exact same character Djimon Hounsou played in Gladiator, but he's convincing enough in the part that the film gains a small amount of credibility whenever he's on screen. I will give Anderson this much: he does have a decent understand of the technical stuff. The film looks fine on a cinematography level, if a bit generic. The editing can be choppy, especially during fight scenes, but is otherwise okay. The music is a bit repetitive but does give it a good sense of scale, and the production design is colorful and sets the scene well. The special effects department is clearly where the money went on the picture, as all the stuff with the volcano and the destruction caused by it does look pretty nice. But without a solid foundation, all of these details feel like a fine curtain used to mask a shoddy product. Pompeii is bad, but not at all in the interesting way. It's derivative and tedious, without an original thought in its head on any level. The story is bland, the acting is stiff, and the dialogue is laughable. Paul W.S. Anderson isn't a completely talentless hack. He's made some entertaining movies in his time, like the genuinely creepy Event Horizon and the enjoyably cheesy Mortal Kombat. Still the best video game movie ever. But too often he ends up making uninspired dreck like this. Skip this movie, because more than likely you've already seen a much better version of it. Final verdict, 2.5. Starring Seth Rogen, Pineapple Express, Zac Efron, Hairspray, Rose Byrne, X-Men, First Class, Dave Franco, 21 Jump Street, Ike Barinholtz, The Minty Project, Lisa Kudrow, Easy A. Director, Nicholas Stoller, Forgetting Sarah Marshall. Writers, Andrew J. Cohen, Brendan O'Brien. Runtime, 1 hour 36 minutes. Release date, 3rd of May, UK, 9th of May, US. The frat house comedy is a subgenre that just never dies. Ever since John Landis kickstarted the trend with Animal House, every couple of years there comes along a movie that tries to become its generation's Animal House. Revenge of the Nerds, Van Wilder, Old School, the list goes on. So how does Bad Neighbors, or just Neighbors as it is called in the US, changed overseas, likely to avoid confusion with the certain Australian soap opera, fare against such a wide fare of similar offerings? Does it pass the test and join the fraternity? Or is this one pledge that's going to chicken out? Bad Neighbors is a breath of fresh air for the genre mainly because it views the proceedings from a fresh perspective. The film is primarily from the point of view of the sensible adults for once, but without making them look like spoilsports. They call out the frats on their behavior, but they also get in on the fun every once in a while and even end up doing some devious stuff themselves. But that's not to say that the frats themselves are one-dimensional obnoxious twats. No sir, their perspective is painted with just enough sympathy that you never hate them completely even when they go over the line. The film manages to strike a good balance between the two sides, never making either one seem too despicable whilst still making both of them funny and entertaining. The story even manages to have morals better written than most comedies of this ilk, with Seth Rogen and Rose Byrne's characters learning to be responsible adults without becoming curmudgeons, and Zac Efron coming to realize that his life as a party animal is coming to a close. It's effort like this that makes Bad Neighbors that much more entertaining and not just a lazy hodgepodge of sex and stoner gags. Seth Rogen may not have much range as an actor, but he's dependable and always worth a few laughs. He is playing a somewhat more responsible character with a job, a wife and a kid on his shoulders, but he's still the pot-smoking thunderhead we've all come to love. His chemistry with Byrne is surprisingly good, working off each other both comedically and emotionally well enough that I bought them as a couple. Zac Efron, much like Rogen, has also been somewhat typecast as the pretty boy for most of his career, and he's always been, somewhat unfairly, thrashed about. Sure, he was in those High School Musical movies, but every other Hollywood teen crush was in a similar position at some point in their careers. Efron has proven himself to be a pretty decent actor at points, see the criminally underrated Me Orson Welles for proof of that, and in Bad Neighbors he both transcends expectations and does well doing so. He manages to be everything you want from a stereotypical bro douche, but imbues his role with enough character and motivation that he comes off like a somewhat real person and not someone you want to punch in the face, and he even plays off against Trojan startlingly well. It's the most surprising comedic turn I've seen from an actor since Channing Tatum in 21 Jump Street, and I'd be happy to see him continue in this fashion. The rest of the cast works but don't get a lot of focus. Dave Franco is pretty good, especially when opposite Efron. A scene where they exchange plentiful variations of the brothers before Ho's mantra is a particularly good moment. Ike Barinholtz also gets some good laughs, but everyone else just comes and goes. Lisa Kudrow is relegated to two brief scenes. Submarine's Craig Roberts melds into the background for half the movie before being given something to do, and Christopher Mintz-Plasse feels completely wasted. His subplot with Barinholtz and Carla Gallo is seriously underdeveloped and mostly pointless. Why even harm Cloven if you're not going to do anything with him? Comedies aren't usually where you go looking for a technical extravaganza, but Bad Neighbors does manage to look a bit more distinctive. The party scenes in particular look great, with lots of neon and pastels flying around to give these sections a different feel to the rest of the movie. Brandon Trost has become one of my favorite cinematographers lately, and he again proves he can make anything look cool. This is the guy who shot Crank 2. What else would you expect? Bad Neighbors works because it puts in far more effort than you'd expect. It's got all the laughs you want from a frat house comedy, but sweetens the deal with a well-conceived screenplay, relatable human characters, and excellent performances to carry it all. It's not exactly revolutionary, but it is a lot of fun. Final verdict, 8.5. Starring Arnold Schwarzenegger, The Terminator, Sam Worthington, Avatar, Olivia Williams, The Sixth Sense, Terrence Howard, Prisoners, Meyer Linus, World War Z. Director, David Ayer, End of Watch. Writers, Skip Woods, A Good Day to Die Hard, and David Ayer. Runtime, 1 hour 49 minutes. Release date, 28th of March, US, 7th of May, UK. Arnold Schwarzenegger has had a surprisingly hard time since coming back to the movies. Aside from the Expendables franchise, where he only makes glorified cameos anyway, his recent fare has been either critically panned, done poorly at the box office, or both a real step down for the man who helped define a generation of action movies. So does teaming up with the man behind End of Watch and Training Day seem like a good idea? On paper, sure, but in execution? Unfortunately, Skip Woods, easily the worst screenwriter working in Hollywood right now, has struck again with this one. But with their doing rewrites and directing, you'd hope he could do something to make Sabotage watchable. But he hasn't, and what ends up on screen is a sloppy mess. The plot outline seems good in concept, mixing hardcore action with mystery thriller, but the actual script lets everything down. The pacing is horrendous, making what should feel like edge-of-your-seat thrills feel like a chore. The plot feels needlessly complicated and goes on for too long. And the reveals are so obvious because the film doesn't cover its tracks well enough. Note to Mr. Woods: when you want to create a mystery, you make it seem plausible that it could be anyone. You don't go sticking flashing arrows over the culprits, because it not only makes all the other characters look like idiots but it bores your audience to tears. The film's tone is all over the place too, mixing crude humor with extremely violent imagery but in a way that doesn't work at all. And even the film's morals seem mangled and confusing. Woods seems to only have two character archetypes that he keeps using over and over again: bland or obnoxious. He made Wolverine a stodgy brute, he wrote John McClane as an ignorant blockhead, and now he's managed the impossible, making Arnold Schwarzenegger boring. The man just has nothing to work with here, and so he's left feeling cold and uninteresting. I get that he's played a much darker individual than usual, but Schwarzenegger doesn't pull it off and his character's motivations are left unclear until so late into the film that you just don't care. The rest of his D-team are just as flat. Sam Worthington continues to be the blandest man in movies despite his attempts to look tough. Myrlenos comes off as so batshit insane that you can't believe this woman would ever work for the government, and everyone else is just forgettable. When Josh Holloway's name popped up in the credits, I had genuinely forgotten that he was in the movie. That's how unmemorable most of the characters are. All you will remember about this band of what's is that their banter is annoying beyond belief. The only person I felt any connection to was Olivia Williams, mainly because she spends most of her time calling out all these characters on their bullshit. The film has that same gritty look that all of Vera's films have, utilizing a lot of grimy locales and handheld photography. When the film finally gets to the action scenes, which are spread way too thinly across the runtime, they're actually not too bad. A car chase near the end of the film I'd even call pretty fun, but it's not worth sitting through everything else to get to it. Sabotage holds the honor of being one of the most boring and irritating films I've seen in a long time. The story is messy and fails to follow up on its intriguing premise. The characters are one-dimensional and contemptible, and a broken bar. You know what, that's all I need to say. You fail at story and character, you fail overall by default. I don't care if the action's decent. David Ayer has done much better than this, and hopefully will continue to. As for Skip Woods, all I have to say is, who keeps hiring this schmuck? Final verdict, 2/10. Starring Aaron Taylor Johnson, Kick-Ass, Ken Watanabe, Inception, Elizabeth Olsen, Kill Your Darlings, Sally Hawkins, Blue Jasmine, David Strathairn, Good Night, and Good Luck, Bryan Cranston, Argo. Director, Gareth Edwards, Monsters. Writer, Max Borenstein. Runtime, 2 hours 3 minutes. Release date, 15th of May, UK, 16th of May, US. The self-proclaimed king of the monsters has returned to the big screen after a 10-year hiatus, his last appearance being 2004's Godzilla, Final Wars, and this time the Americans are taking another shot at it. After Roland Emmerich's 1998 disaster of a disaster film, Monsters director Gareth Edwards has been given the reins to try and salvage Godzilla's reputation in the Western world. In a land inhabited by Cloverfield, Transformers and Pacific Rim, is there room anymore for the original giant movie monster? Right off the bat, I can easily get this out of the way. Yes, this is a much better film than the Emmerich version and a much more accurate representation of Godzilla himself. He looks like Godzilla, he sounds like Godzilla, and he does the things you expect Godzilla to do. But getting that part right alone won't make this a good movie. So how does the rest of it pan out? Godzilla certainly takes itself very seriously and strikes a good tone. It's pensive enough that you can buy the somewhat ridiculous premise, but not so po-faced that it sucks the enjoyment out of the picture. The film takes the right approach by being coy about showing us the monsters at first before unleashing them onto the world, but I felt the pacing consistently lagged. It takes just a tad too long to get to the action, and even once the plot gets really going there's too much time spent away from the main event. The film has about enough plot for a 90-minute romp, but it feels needlessly stretched out to just over 2 hours. When the film finally gets to its big climax it does deliver on its promise, but it feels less like a treat for your patience and more like an apology for the delay. You're glad it's finally here and you feel satisfied by the quality, but you can't shake the fact that it should have come sooner. I could accept the long stretches spent on the human characters if they were interesting, but that's the problem. They're not. The film's cast is impressive and they give it their all at every chance they can get, but their roles all feel a bit thinly drawn. Taylor Johnson's Ford Brody is your basic stock protagonist with no flourish, the brave hero with a family to get back to, a connection to the crisis at hand, and with just the right skills needed to help avert it. He feels too much like a passive observer of the narrative and avatar for the audience to inhabit while they watch all of the excitement but doing very little to engage with it. Up until the climax, Brody never impacts the plot in a significant way and he's only given the barest of motivations to keep going. That motivation happens to be played by Elizabeth Olsen, who shares good chemistry with Taylor Johnson, but their screen time together is minimal and we aren't given enough time to connect with them as much as the film thinks we are. Pretty much everyone else feels like an archetype, but one's cast with really good actors. Ken Watanabe and Sally Hawkins play the classic scientists that initially hide the truth as they try to avert disaster, whilst David Strathairn is stuck with the old reliable military man who will take drastic measures that threaten others in order to end the disaster earlier and ignores the scientists' better solution. They all do it very well, but it's hard to excuse stereotypes especially when they play them so straight. Only Bryan Cranston manages to break this mold and he delivers a powerhouse performance despite the script's deficiencies. Sure, he's also stuck playing the traditional crazy scientist who saw it all coming but nobody believes him role, but Cranston sells it through sheer force of personality. He's easily the acting highlight of the movie, and it's a shame his screen time is fairly limited. Where Godzilla thankfully shines is all in the spectacle. On a technical level, this gets everything pretty much right. The action sequences, when they decide to show up, are phenomenal. The scope and choreography of them is stupendous to behold, packed with plenty of crumbling buildings, fiery explosions and monsters throwing each other about. The cinematography really shows off the scale of the entire production, and the moody colors and lighting help sell the world in peril. The visual effects are top-notch, creating the most believable and accurate representation of Godzilla on screen so far, and the design of him and the other creatures are interesting and unique. The sound design is masterful, with thunderous thumps and reverberant roars kicking in at all the right moments, and Alexander Desplat's score is saturnine and oozing with dread. If you can see this movie in IMAX, do so. The size of it all alone is worth the price of admission. Godzilla is an enjoyable film for the most part. The tone is well balanced. The action scenes are exhilarating and it represents Godzilla himself in the way he should be. But the story's pacing issues and bland characters do put a serious damper on the fun. I understand that the film needs human characters, as Godzilla himself doesn't have a personality to hold the entire film, but the humans don't seem to have much persona either, so it doesn't work. Next time around, either give us more compelling characters or just make the movie about Godzilla. A remake of Destroy All Monsters done in this style would be much appreciated.